It all kicks off in a dark, rainy forest. There, a group of heavily armed knights marches through the woods, searching for someone. Suddenly, one of them finally spots the target and asks the vampire if he had fun hiding all night. He says the filthy creature took many lives while it was on the loose, and that tricking the holy knights was a neat trick, but his part in this play is over. The knight then pulls his sword from the vampire and shoves him to the ground. He claims that the vampire's appearance alone is proof of all his sins. And finally, he asks if the vampire knows something, revealing that he intentionally didn't catch him sooner. He explains that his late entry into the pursuit group was all planned. He did it to stand out by capturing a rare vampire and to send a warning to the faithless. Our boy then understands that this world is a jungle where the strong always hunt the weak, and in this place everything is decided by power, which is why he always tried to run from it all. But running didn't do any good, as he's now been captured by the relentless knight, and this is the result of a life spent hiding and rolling around like a corrupted being. The knight says the vampire's very existence insults and tarnishes the church's prestige. Fallen on the ground, our hero thinks that if he had another chance, things would be different. Then he lets out a scream and unexpectedly wakes up somewhere else. He then notices that the place feels a bit familiar. Completely confused, our protagonist wonders what the heck just happened. He realizes his neck and limbs are all intact without a single scratch. Our boy finds it strange, as he was sure he had passed on, but he recognizes the tent. Looking at a makeshift calendar, he sees the date is from 6 months in the past. At that moment, it clicks, and the guy understands that somehow he's gone back in time. Eugene then clenches his fists tightly, thinking about the second chance he just received. The story takes us to a secluded village in the forest, a place untouched by humans. This was where our hero lived as a weak vampire, hiding and trying to survive. He didn't drink human blood, but one day his instincts took over, and everything went wrong. After that, mercenaries and holy knights began patrolling the entire village looking for him. Scared, Eugene spent 12 long years drinking only the blood of forest animals. He doesn't know how he went back in time, but now he can't make the same mistakes as before. He thinks that if he's going to meet his end anyway, the only way forward is to get strong enough that no one can stop him. With that, our protagonist decides that from now on, he will change his survival strategy. The guy remembers that vampires can absorb power by sucking blood, so the stronger the blood's owner, the greater the amount of power that can be obtained. And at that moment, a creature appears before him. It was the master of the forest, a giant beast that emerges from the swamp to attack our hero. The creature then lunges at him, and he barely dodges. As he recovers on the ground, he notices his current body is weak and can only dodge, but if he can get just a small cut on the beast, he'll be able to suck the creature's blood and finally gain the power to fight for real. The survival method he used until now was to erase his presence as much as possible, but since he knows that failed, there's no reason to hesitate, as he desperately needs power. With all his might, our protagonist tries to pierce the creature's skin, but apparently it doesn't work, and the monster hits him with its tail, sending him flying. With just one hit, Eugene was completely wrecked, and he's not sure if he can win this battle. We're then told that roamers are monsters living in regions called magic realms. Some of them possess magic stones even in powerless environments and are rarer than jewels. For this creature, the magic stone is its core, and if our hero can find it, he might turn things around. But the power difference is obvious, and maybe he took this opportunity a little too lightly. The master of the forest could end his life before he even managed to injure it. With that, the monster attacks again, causing a huge explosion in the murky swamp water. With a sad look, seeing his end approach, Eugene thinks it would be strange to get another chance to be reborn again. Then the gator bites down on him as he thinks he overestimated himself, and that's why he can never let his guard down. For that reason, he always crawled and held his breath so no one would find him. Our boy always fought hard just to survive, and now would be no different. Inside the creature, he has tremendous willpower and bites the monster's tongue, stating that this time he will fight and win. Eugene thinks that if he doesn't win now, he won't get another opportunity to change his fate, so he shoves his hand into the monster's mouth to grab the creature's power core. He rips out the magic stone, because survival is always based on the blood of others. With an intense glow, the gem shatters into 1,000 pieces, releasing all its energy. After a while, the night once again reigns calm and silent over the swamp, but suddenly, a massive explosion of light illuminates the entire forest. Our boy remembers vowing that if he had another chance, he would do everything differently this time. He would choose the path of fighting and confrontation instead of spending his whole life on the run. With that, a transformed Eugene now faces the carnage he himself caused. With a new look and red eyes, he declares that he will conquer both blood and victory. The night continues peacefully as Eugene stands under the imposing moonlight. He thinks he only needed the monster's blood, but ended up absorbing the mana stone as well. The ability he gained was being able to create black scales on his skin like armor. Eugene remembers finding out about the monster when he was captured by mercenaries in the past. Back then, amidst the chaos, he drank the creature's blood and managed to escape. Knowing the effects, he decided to drink the creature's blood again. No matter what, that night Jung Durit would find him anywhere, so he must have a special detection ability. With dawn approaching, Eugene thinks it's best not to test his new power and to head back to his hideout. Suddenly, a mysterious voice says that the false master who stole its territory and turned the lake into a swamp is gone. Then this voice thanks our protagonist for giving that monster such a terrible end, and that invading the place and dirtying the land with blood are sins that must be paid for. At that, an elemental creature appears and says this is the territory protected by the great Miriam. With a furious look, she curses Eugene, saying his body will suffer a curse and be torn to pieces. The little fairy wonders if the bald vampire heard her, but our hero simply asks what she is. The small creature is in total shock, realizing Eugene is speaking directly to her. In disbelief, the fairy is speechless, and our protagonist repeats the question. Wanting an answer, she asks if he heard everything, and the guy confirms, mentioning he was called a bald vampire, which makes the fairy blush. The creature introduces herself as Miriam, a water spirit, and says she was the master of this place for 15 years. She corrects herself, saying she was actually a strategic partner, and thanks him again for finishing off the monster. The fairy thinks she saw an old bald guy get devoured, and then suddenly a handsome guy appeared, and that's when our hero notices something odd. The fairy compliments the tattoo and asks what it means, but our hero can't say, as it's always been there. He says he was born a vampire and that since his earliest memories, the 10 tattoos were already on his body. Since he doesn't remember his past, he just focused on staying quiet and surviving without looking back. Our boy wonders if one of the tattoos was a seal that broke, and then he says goodbye to the fairy. She complains that she's all alone and that purifying the lake will take a very long time to complete. The little fairy then offers to serve him fresh water, bragging about how delicious her water is. Miriam insists, saying clean water improves the skin, but our protagonist shows no reaction. She then starts to throw up the water, seeing that Eugene turns and walks away, and the desperate fairy begs him to stay, but the guy says he doesn't need that. A few days later, the scene shifts to Broadwing Village, a small town in the middle of the mountains. A man runs into a house and yells to the chief that the red-eyed monster has appeared. At that, all the villagers pour into the street, staring in shock at something at the village entrance. On the ground was a large pile of hunted animals like boars, deer, rabbits, and even ducks. The folks wonder what the red-eyed monster is planning with all that food. It's then revealed that this monster is our hero, who lives in the mountains and shares his hunt with the village. Hiding in the bushes, our hero asks if he can enter the village for a bit. It's revealed that when he appeared over 10 years ago, everyone was terrified of his presence, but he brought animals as tribute, and so the people stopped worrying about him. Our protagonist says he lived far away because he was sick, but now he's finally cured. He says he received a lot of help from the village and would like to repay all their kindness. The villagers are completely shocked, and he tells them to call him if anything happens. Then our boy takes off his mask, revealing an incredibly handsome face and a gentle smile. The village crowd goes absolutely wild over the guy's beauty, and some even faint from the excitement. Someone wonders if the creature from the forest was actually a half-elf or even a noble. The village chief then thinks that he always wore a mask and never imagined he looked like that. The fairy Miriam appears and asks Eugene what he's thinking after giving away all the food. Our protagonist explains that among humans, showing goodwill is very important. Miriam doesn't understand why he cares about people he's not even going to devour and who he'll be leaving soon. And our hero says he can't just ignore what's about to happen. He reveals that if they don't act, mercenaries will invade the village, and everyone there will soon perish. He explains that the mercenaries are coming to the village to take a specific boy. Their plan is to kidnap the boy for a lord and then erase all witnesses to the crime. The fairy Miriam is shocked and wonders if what our protagonist is saying is true. Eugene says they'll find out soon enough if it's true or not, leaving the fairy even more confused. She doesn't understand what gaining their trust has to do with mercenaries, and the guy just calls her rude. While flying distractedly, Miriam ends up crashing right into our hero, who had stopped suddenly. The little creature complains in pain and asks why he stopped like that out of nowhere in the middle of the path, but she cuts her complaint short when she notices our boy is staring intently at something. Just ahead, a group of mercenaries armed to the teeth appears on the forest road. The men see our protagonist alone and wonder who this guy is, standing in their way. Their leader says the guy looks weak, that the plan was to invade the village secretly. He notes that our hero is unarmed and alone, but if he shouts, it could ruin everything. With that, the chief orders one of his men to make sure he doesn't make a sound. Miriam, worried, screams desperately for Eugene. The mercenary then and moves in to attack him with his axe. But our protagonist didn't show a hint of fear, and in the blink of an eye, he takes down the mercenary. While the rest of the group was in shock, Eugene explains to Marianne that they need the village's trust, that way they won't look suspicious to anyone. And finally, he reveals his real plan, which is to take out all the mercenaries right there. One of the men who survived the first attack screams in terror that the guy is a vampire, but their leader tells them not to be afraid, and that this is a great chance to earn a reward. The man attacks with his sword, but our boy stops the blade with just one hand, leaving the enemy in a panic, and then he finishes off the mercenary leader without any mercy. Seeing this, the rest of the group realizes he's no ordinary guy and decides to attack all at once. Several men charge forward, yelling that the vampire's head will be theirs, but our hero isn't fazed. In the blink of an eye, our protagonist eliminates them one after another. A big burly mercenary then charges forward and tells his friends not to attack recklessly, and he yells that he'll crush anyone who gets in his way, but he's shocked when our protagonist manages to stop the blow with one hand, without any effort. With a cold stare, our boy says that the day is growing dark, and that's not going to be good for the mercenaries. Then he finishes off the big guy with one strike. Amidst the bodies of his enemies, he says that the night is his time and the best moment to get some blood. Moments later, the villagers arrive and are completely shocked by what they find. Seeing the whole mess, one of the men wonders how all of this could have happened. The village chief then faces our hero and asks directly if he was responsible for all of this. Our boy denies it on the spot and says he found the men while returning from a hunt in the woods. He points to a pile of slain wolves and says they were the real culprits behind the attack on the mercenaries. The villagers approach cautiously and see the bodies of several black wolves scattered on the ground. He explains that he took out a few wolves, but others might be nearby, which makes the chief very suspicious. But one of the villagers confirms there are wolf claw marks on the men's bodies, supporting the story. Another villager confirms the story, saying all the bodies were attacked by wild wolves. The chief still finds it strange but apologizes for suspecting our hero without any reason. He suggests burying the bodies in the village so they don't become animal food, while Marianne calls our hero a liar. In her thoughts, the fairy remembers that the wolves only showed up later to clean up the mess he made. She also recalls that our boy personally forged the bite marks on the bodies to cover his tracks. Marianne doesn't understand why he cares so much about his image when they could just leave. The little fairy continues to ponder his intentions as our hero prepares to show something. He hands over a letter he found on the mercenaries and asks if the village chief wants to read its contents. The man recognizes Lord Taiwan's seal on the letter and is shocked by what's written on the paper. With wide eyes, he can't believe what he's read and wonders if it's really true. The chief then yells desperately, asking if a boy named Pelid is in the village at that moment. The letter reveals that Pelid might be the illegitimate son of Lord Taiwan, making him an important target. Our protagonist then wonders if that brat is really a member of the nobility. In a flashback, we see the mercenary leader looking completely terrified, while our protagonist takes everyone down. One of the mercenaries yells that if they go back now, they'll be done for anyway, and tells everyone to fight. He says that even if he's a monster, our hero only has 2 arms, so they should attack together. Their leader despairs as he can't even escape with the vampire in the way. With no other option, the mercenary leader charges with his dagger in a desperate attack against our hero, but our protagonist turns towards him and hits him with a blow to the stomach. The impact is so strong that the man flies back and slams into a tree, and finally falls to the ground. At a dead end, the mercenary starts begging for him to stop. He asks why he was attacked and if our protagonist was waiting for them from the start of the mission. He tries to lie, saying he just had business in the village, but Eugene already knew the whole truth and doesn't believe him. With an intimidating look, our protagonist says he's very curious about their business in his village. The mercenary panics and says he didn't know a vampire lord ruled the village in that region. Then he reveals he was looking for the illegitimate son of the Taiwan family who was hiding there. Our hero calls him a liar and asks for the real reason, as they wouldn't need so many men for that, and he asks if the plan was to wipe out the entire village. The man denies it and confesses they were hired by the legitimate sons of the Taiwan family. He swears the mission was just to kidnap the boy and they brought reinforcements purely as a precaution. Our protagonist's face turns serious as he remembers one of the masterminds behind that job. It was Bertel Taiwan, the manager of the vampire hunting team that tormented him in the past. With that, our boy understands that the plan to wipe out the village was pure greed from the mercenaries, and it was because of this that the Holy Knights ended up discovering his location in the past. The mercenary continues to beg and swears he would never have done it if he knew a vampire was there. Eugene then says he understands and tells him to watch out for wolves on his way back. Unbelieving his own luck, the man starts thanking our hero for sparing him, but our protagonist is no fool and finishes off the last enemy without a second thought. The fairy doesn't understand anything, but he explains that he can't leave anyone alive after being discovered. With a cold look, our boy says he did everything at the right time for his plan to work. Just then, several glowing eyes appear in the darkness of the night, drawn by the scent in the area. Meanwhile, the chief confirms to the villagers that the men wanted to take Peled to the castle. A villager remembers that Peled's mother passed away, and he's been living alone in the village for 8 years. Our boy offers to take the boy, since he knows the forest well and can avoid the beasts. The chief is surprised and says they couldn't possibly ask such a thing of him. Eugene smiles and says a knight can't ignore this, leaving Marianne indignant at the lie. The little fairy is completely speechless at our hero's nerve. The villagers are also in shock, and the chief even asks if he's really a knight. Marianne freaks out and can't believe what our protagonist is doing right in front of her. With a smirk, our hero says he hasn't properly introduced himself to everyone yet. He introduces himself as Yan Eugene of the Eugene family, and the fairy wonders if they'll believe it. One of the villagers scolds another, saying it's rude to doubt, and that they should call him Sir Eugene. Our boy explains to the fairy that these people have never seen a real noble in their lives. He continues, saying that even if he pretends to be a noble, they wouldn't know the difference. The village folks now believe everything and ask if he stayed in the forest to train. Our protagonist says he had his reasons for living in isolation, and all the villagers celebrate. The chief worries about not having a way to pay, but our hero says he just needs a place to spend the night. The village chief is happy and offers his home for our hero to stay the night. By day, inside a room, our protagonist tests the new power he acquired. His eyes glow red, and his hand becomes covered in very tough black scales. He realizes the scales block the sunlight, which will make the journey much easier. The fairy Marianne then calls him stupid and asks why he lied like that. Our boy doesn't care, as he'll be leaving soon, and the fairy asks what his real goal is. She wants to know why he stayed quiet for so long and is now making friends with humans. Someone calls him from outside, and our hero shows the fairy that he's already secured a new identity. He explains that people trust titles more than long, confusing explanations. Our protagonist knows that only this village would believe a lie as poorly crafted as this one. With that, he puts his mask back on and says that from now on, he will make the lie real. The chief then hands over a letter of introduction and asks our hero to take good care of young Peled. The boy introduces himself as Peled and says it's a pleasure to meet Sir Eugene. Our protagonist then thinks that he'll use the boy to become a real noble. And so, our hero leaves the village with the boy Peled and a few other villagers. Beginning their journey, our hero and Peled walk along a mountain trail. As they approach a village, Peled reads the sign, confirming the name of the place. Our hero asks if the boy can read, and he says his late mother taught him. The boy says his mother learned to read from the man she loved, without knowing he was a noble. At that, the fairy Marianne takes the chance and suggests he ask the boy to teach him how to read. Our protagonist then asks the boy to teach him, leaving Peled shocked. Peled finds it strange that a knight doesn't know how to read, but our hero comes up with an excuse on the spot. He says his sword has kept him alive and that nobility no longer matters to his family. With that, the two continue their way side by side on the dirt road. Our protagonist thinks that with the boy's trust, he can cover all his lies. The fairy Marianne is impressed and compliments our hero's incredible acting skills, but she warns him that if he keeps lying so much, people might start to get suspicious. But to the fairy's surprise, the boy Peled has already believed everything. With his eyes shining, Peled then apologizes, saying he didn't trust him at first because of his appearance. He explains that everyone in the village called him a monster, and so he ended up being influenced. Peled says that from now on, he will believe what he sees and that it makes sense he can't read. He offers to teach our hero little by little, so he won't be embarrassed. But just as Peled was about to say more, our protagonist senses danger approaching. Suddenly, an arrow flies right past the boy's face, but our protagonist catches it instantly. Peled is startled by it and falls to the ground. One of the bandits complains to the other about how he shot the arrow with the crossbow. With his eyes wide with fear, Peled realizes they are surrounded by bandits. The bandit leader smiles and says their scared faces save a lot of time. With that, the man orders them to drop their backpacks and empty all their pockets. But before the bandit finishes his sentence, our protagonist cuts him down with his sword, and in no time the bandit leader was eliminated. Peled is completely shocked to see the bandit's head rolling on the ground. Seeing his brother down on the ground, one of the bandits screams in despair. Our hero then says they did as he asked, and were quick to hand over their lives. With that, the man's brother charges at our hero, full of rage, but our protagonist defeats him with a single blow, and finishes off the group of bandits in the blink of an eye. The last survivor is completely terrified and starts begging for his life, but our hero prepares to strike him with the sword, and throws it right into the man's chest, and in a short time all the bandits have been eliminated. He then wonders why humans always try to steal from and finish off the weaker ones. With a cold look, he questions if it's okay to hurt someone just because they look fragile. Our boy turns to Peled and asks if he'll understand these things when he learns to read. The young man is completely in shock from the brutal scene he just witnessed. Our hero reminds him that he said he would believe what he saw with his own eyes. Then he says he won't let a single drop of blood touch the boy. After a while, the pair finally arrives in a large city, full of people and shops. At a local market, a vendor announces rare herbs for 20 copper coins a pack. A customer complains that the shop down the street sells the same product for half the price. While Miriam enjoys the city, Peled warns our hero to be careful when shopping. The boy explains that he's been there before with the village chief, and knows the merchants are ruthless. Next to them, a man argues with a vendor and demands his money back right away, but our protagonist thinks that before worrying about that, he needs money. With that, he enters a leather shop and asks Peled to wait outside for a moment. Our boy then places a large piece of leather on the counter and asks the shopkeeper to appraise it. The man recognizes the black wolf leather and is surprised by the amount he brought. The shopkeeper sizes him up from head to toe and notices he doesn't look like an experienced hunter. Seeing his clothes, the merchant thinks he's a wanderer, not a trader. With a sly smile, the man decides he's going to trick the guy and make a huge profit. The shopkeeper says the leather is damaged and offers 18 silver coins, a very low price. Our hero just stares at him with a serious face, and the man gets scared seeing such bloodlust and realizing he wasn't just some random person. He starts to sweat and stammers, saying that black wolf leather is rare and limited, but seeing that Eugene was staring at him without saying a word, the merchant asks him to say something instead of just staring. Trying to hide his fear, the merchant laughs and says that since it's his first time there, he'll be generous and raise the price. But our protagonist continues to stare at him with a terrifying look. The shopkeeper realizes the offer is still too low and in desperation raises the value to 25 coins. Desperate, the man keeps raising the price to 27 and then to 28 coins. Our boy keeps staring, and the vendor wonders how much more this guy wants to get out of him. Reaching his limit, the man offers 30 silver coins, and our hero finally accepts the deal. Later that night, the pair camps around a fire to rest for a bit. Our protagonist, now with a new mask, thinks the writing looks like squiggly worms and remembers Peled taught him the basics. He then thinks he's still a long way from being able to read that kind of writing correctly. Miriam compliments the new clothes, and our boy says that for the price he paid, they're pretty good. He smiles, saying the market was generous, but the fairy asks if he's talking about the vendor he intimidated. She remembers the negotiation and thinks he should have pushed harder to buy something better. Our hero replies that he just needs something to block the sun, and Miriam tells him to enjoy life more. The fairy says vampires are the noblest and should live in castles with silk clothes. Our boy asks how she knows so much, and the little fairy says she comes from the spirit realm. Miriam advises him to study, since he can live for 200 years, but our hero admits he can't read. He asks if she's good for anything other than making water, and just then, Peled calls him suddenly. The boy approaches with a strange smile and asks who our hero was talking to. Our protagonist lies, saying he was talking to himself and apologizes for remembering something strange. Miriam thinks the rabbit seen earlier was too much for the boy, who fainted on the spot. Our hero tells Peled not to worry, as he still has energy and the night is young. The young man gets excited and says he has plenty of paper, so he'll teach our protagonist to read as much as he wants. And so the night goes on with the two studying together around the campfire in the forest. Our boy finds it very easy and wonders if it's always like this, but Peled says he's extraordinary. The boy says it took him months, and the normal time is a year, leaving our hero surprised. Our protagonist asks if Peled will be okay, as suddenly becoming a noble won't be easy. The young man says his mother never really explained it, and it still hasn't sunk in for him. He then admits he didn't even expect to be well received by Lord Taiwan and blushes at the thought. But suddenly, a group of armed knights appears in the darkness of the night, startling the pair. Their leader approaches with a smile and says that camping around here isn't a good idea. With that, our hero and Peled are on high alert, watching the men's movements. The man notes that they are real mercenaries and asks where the duo is heading. Our protagonist knows that lying will only raise suspicion, so he decides to tell the truth. He says they are going to Lord Taiwan's castle, and the man asks to share their camp. At this, a young blonde man complains to the leader, Partek, about them wanting to camp there. Partek apologizes for the young man and says he's new to the group and doesn't know how to socialize well. The leader introduces himself, and our boy says he is Knight Yan Eugene, leaving the young blonde man shocked. The guy laughs and asks how he can be a knight without armor and with that appearance. Then he approaches and asks our hero to be honest, as he doesn't look like a knight. Ray-Ban continues to provoke him and says he's never heard of the Eugene house in his entire life. With a wicked smile, the young man is sure our protagonist is just some random phony. Our hero becomes visibly annoyed with the situation, and his eyes glow an intense red. He thinks he can't lie anymore, and that if the guy keeps digging, the story will change. With a furious look, our hero thinks he could take out all the mercenaries right there. But before he could do anything, the group leader grabs the young blonde man's shoulder tightly. With a serious look, Partek just calls out Raban's name, who doesn't understand the situation. Then, in a swift and unexpected move, the leader lands a powerful blow to his companion companion's face. The impact of the blow is so strong that the guy flies back and hits the ground hard, unresponsive. Partik then bows and apologizes for his recruit's rudeness, leaving the young man in shock. Our protagonist tells him to forget it, and the leader thanks him greatly for his mercy. Our boy thinks that to avoid more suspicion, he needs to become a real knight soon. Meanwhile, the young mercenary is still on the ground, completely stunned by the blow. He snaps out of his trance and is totally confused about what just happened there in the forest. The guy gets up, not understanding anything, and the leader calls him an idiot for his reckless actions. Partik yells at him, asking if the young man has a death wish for doing that. With that, he slaps the guy again, saying he saved his life, as they almost all perished there. The leader scolds him for judging only by appearance and not seeing what's right in front of him. He then reveals that our hero's cloak is high class and reinforced with special leather. Partik says the cheapest one cost 10 silver coins, and the young man is shocked, as that's 3 times his salary. The leader remembers that our hero was reading a letter, which proves he's no ordinary guy. He says the young man was about to draw his sword and that with luck, only 2 of them would have survived. With a watchful eye, Partik explains that while Raben was talking nonsense, he was observing our hero. He saw our protagonist put his right hand inside his cloak and pull his left arm back. The mercenary explains that this is the posture of someone who controls their center of gravity to attack. If he had been a second later, the young man's neck would have been history, but Raben retorts that the leader should have blocked it. Partik then asks if the guy has any idea how terrifying a real knight is. He says that a knight is given a wooden sword at birth and spends their life specializing in combat. Then they enter dungeons and face monsters without fear of perishing to gain combat experience. And then they go to battlefields to earn merit, finishing off their enemies without any mercy. Only the one who spills much blood and catches the eye of the nobles is finally named a knight. The leader says that impersonating a knight is a crime, and it's a problem if he's real, and even worse if he's fake. He continues, saying that no one would pretend to be a knight without great confidence in their sword. Raben then asks if that means our hero is stronger than him, and Partik confirms that he probably is. The leader remembers that our hero is heading to the castle, and that they will meet again on the way. Our boy hears everything and thinks that the title of knight carries a lot of weight, and he needs to prepare. He wonders why the Taiwan family hired bad mercenaries before if they already had these guys. Suddenly, our protagonist approaches and Raben panics, not knowing why he's coming over. With a smile, our hero says he heard they are also heading to Lord Taiwan's castle. Since their destination is the same, our boy suggests they all travel to the castle together. The mercenaries are shocked by the invitation and by our protagonist's stunning beauty. Sometime later, the group finally arrives at the village of Martella, a very busy and crowded place. Our boy thinks that luckily the men believe him, and so he'll be able to gather information, but he knows the trouble comes next, and at that moment, the fairy Miriam appears, calling for him in the crowd. The little fairy says she spied on the mercenaries, and our hero asks if she found out anything useful. The first piece of information is that Lord Taiwan's health is so bad he could pass away any day. She also reveals that a new dungeon has been discovered, but the family can't explore it right now. Our protagonist becomes thoughtful at the idea of a new dungeon to be explored in the region. The fairy then gets worried and asks what will happen to Pelid if Lord Taiwan passes away soon. Our hero coldly replies that it's none of his business, and the fairy despairs for the boy's future. Miriam fears the boy will be attacked by his brothers, but our protagonist just watches Pelid in silence. The reason Lord Taiwan called for the young man is just to see his son's face one last time before he departs. With a determined look, our boy says that from that moment on, the fate of both of them will change forever. After a long journey, the group of mercenaries finally reaches their final destination. Before them stands the imposing Castle of Roses, the home of the noble and powerful Lord Taiwan. Our protagonist and Pelid walk impressed through the busy streets of the great castle. The fairy is amazed and says our hero needs to climb the ranks to live in a place like this. Our boy tells the little fairy to stop talking nonsense and hide, leaving Pelid very confused. Suddenly, one of the castle guards stops the group and asks what they came here to do. Partik introduces himself and says his group was sent by the Phelan Merchant Guild. A blonde noble appears and introduces himself as Kamara Taiwan, the eldest son and heir of the family. The mercenary leader confirms that the delivery arrives safely, and the noble orders them to unload everything. Kamara then notices our hero standing there and asks who he is and why he isn't moving with the others. Our protagonist steps forward and introduces himself as Knight Yan Eugene, surprising the noble, but suddenly a blonde man in armor arrives and asks what his brother Kamara is doing. Our protagonist recognizes that familiar voice while the noble gets annoyed by the interruption. The newcomer approaches and says he's already told his brother not to meddle in his affairs. He continues saying his duty as the castle's protector is to investigate all outsiders. With wide eyes, our hero thinks it would be impossible to forget that voice. It was the chief officer of the vampire pursuit team who discovered him in his hideout. It was he who tormented him intensely along with the knight Jung Durit in his dark past. The man before him was none other than the fearsome knight knight Bro Taiwan, one of his greatest enemies. Bertel Taiwan, the second son of the family and a knight, asks what his brother is doing there. Kamara responds sarcastically, saying people might mistake him for the true heir. With a serious look, the knight says that's not what he meant by his words. Then Bertel turns to our protagonist and asks for permission to speak directly with him. Our boy hands him a letter and says it was sent by the chief of Broadwing village. The knight is surprised to hear the village's name and seems to recognize it from somewhere. Without hesitation, Bertel takes the letter from our hero's hands to check its contents. Kamara, the older brother, also takes the letter to read what's written. He recognizes the village chief's name, and at that, Bertel glares at our protagonist suspiciously. The noble is shocked to read that the mercenaries were attacked by wolves in the forest. Then he understands that this boy is the illegitimate son the knight brought to the castle. Pellet introduces himself nervously, and Kamara calls him his new brother with a very fake smile. With a serious look, Bertel says their father was very anxious to finally see him. The knight then orders a guard to take the boy to wash up and get properly dressed. As a soldier leads Pellet inside, the young man looks back, completely confused by everything. But before Bertel could leave, our protagonist interrupts him with a simple, "Wait." Eugene says he wants to discuss his reward and wishes to see Lord Taiwan personally. The knight is furious with the request and immediately yells that it's impossible. He explains that his father is sick and offers gold for our boy to leave at once. But our hero says he went through hell to bring their brother to that place. Angrily, Bertel tells him not to repeat that again, as it won't do any good. The knight yells at our protagonist, who doesn't understand the problem with just seeing him. Kamara intervenes and says he needs to introduce the new brother and that a quick meeting wouldn't hurt. Bertel retorts that his father isn't even awake for an hour and that he can't see some random wanderer. The older brother accuses him of controlling their father's schedule, and Bertel gets irritated by the provocation. Kamara then turns to our hero and apologizes, saying things are complicated. With a fake smile, he says goodbye and tells our protagonist to return home safely. The noble then turns to Pellet and offers to guide him on a tour of the Grand Castle. Our boy thinks that, as expected, he never had any intention of letting him see the Lord, but suddenly, a red-haired man appears and throws some mercenaries to the ground forcefully. The newcomer says he was looking for them and that he finally found them there in the courtyard. He reveals that these men were robbing the townspeople instead of training, which is why he caught them. With a sadistic look, the man suggests finishing one of them off to serve as an example to the others. Bertel thinks that even if they are temporary for the dungeon, he can't just let this slide. The knight says he will discipline them later and suggests they talk in a more private place. At that, Pardek recognizes the man, and our protagonist asks if he knows him from somewhere. The mercenary confirms and reveals that the man is Galfredic, a promising knight who placed third in a tournament. Pardek says Galfredic has monstrous strength and incredible technique, and in the tournament, he went through over 1,000 competitors. Our boy wonders what a guy like that is doing here, and the mercenary thinks it's because of the new dungeon. The man explains that the first knight to conquer a dungeon gains a lot of fame, as raids are dangerous. He continues, saying that Galfredic wants to use the place to get a knighthood from a bigger family. With that, our protagonist calls Pardek and asks if his contract ends today, and the man confirms. Then, with a smirk, our hero asks if he can hire the mercenary for a new job. Night falls over the castle, and the towers rise under the light of a large full moon in the sky. Elsewhere, Bertel observes the mercenaries and thinks he needs to clear that dungeon no matter what. He remembers that ever since his father fell ill, his brother has been eyeing the position of family successor. With that, he understands that his brother brought Galfredic to clear the dungeon and win the people's support. Worried in his office, Kamara thinks about what to do, and suddenly someone knocks on the door. A servant enters and announces that Sir Eugene is asking to see him, leaving the noble deep in thought. He remembers the knight who brought Peled and, without a second thought, tells the servant to let him in. Our protagonist then enters the office, and Kamara welcomes him, asking him to come in and make himself comfortable. The noble tells him not to worry about Peled and that his father will reward him when he wakes up. Kamara thanks him for delivering the letter in front of his brother, as it helped him maintain his composure. The noble seems very pleased with what happened, and our protagonist says he's happy to hear that. Our hero then reveals he only had business with the Lord but was confused by Bertel's interference. With that, the noble's expression changes instantly, and he seems very interested in what our boy is saying. He asks if our hero wanted to see his father to confirm his identity, but Eugene has another proposal. With a serious look, our protagonist asks to be included in the dungeon subjugation squad. Our boy then lets out a small laugh, as if mocking the noble's reaction. At this, Kamara can't hold back and starts laughing loudly at the proposal he just heard from our hero. He says our protagonist is funnier than he thought and repeats the word knight mockingly. The noble continues with his mocking tone and doesn't seem to take our boy's title seriously. He mentions the bandits and asks if our hero wants to join the team just to gain a reputation. Our boy replies that for the noble's current situation, this is a proposal with no downsides. Our protagonist explains that if they succeed, he'll take 100 silver coins and half the loot. The noble is confused, as the offer is good and well below market value. value, so he asks if he accepts. With a confident smile, our hero says that the only one in a hurry here isn't him, but Kamara himself. Kamara asks what he wants, and our hero repeats his proposal of 100 silver coins and half the loot. The noble finds the offer suspiciously cheap, but our boy pressures him for an answer. Kamara thinks that knights live for honor and that, being a wanderer, he seeks glory, not money. Since the guy doesn't want money, the noble is sure that glory is everything to him at that moment. Besides, based on what he heard before, the noble continues to analyze the whole situation carefully. With a smile, our protagonist reinforces that it's not him who's in a hurry, but the noble himself. Kamara is completely shocked to realize he's been caught in our hero's trap. With a wicked smile, the noble understands that our boy knows exactly where to push to get what he wants. He thinks our hero is not like the other knights who only think with their muscles. With that, the noble finally accepts the proposal, as there's no reason to refuse such a good deal. He then extends his hand and says he's looking forward to working with Sir Eugene. Our boy thinks that magic stones are hard to purify, but monster parts are more profitable. At this, Pardek appears and offers to introduce him to a reliable merchant guild. He continues, saying that with this condition, Lord Kamara would have no reason to refuse the proposal. In another room, Bertel complains that adding a member now is last minute and the dungeon is no joke. Bertel warns that one slip up in the dungeon means the end and that inside it's fight or perish. Galfredik says he won't accept an amateur and that his expectations are low because of Kamara. The red-haired knight reinforces that his brother has no connections with the local nobles. With that, Bertel tells Galfredik to complain to Kamara, and the man gets annoyed with the situation. Kamara then arrives, apologizing for the delay, and says he was talking with his new knight. Then he introduces our hero and his group of mercenaries as new members of the attack squad. Bertel recognizes our protagonist and wonders how a guy with that appearance could be a leader. With a fake smile, he tells his brother he can't accept a wanderer with questionable skills, but to everyone's surprise, Kamara says he can at least vouch for the guy's skills. The noble says he heard from his new brother about the bandits who were a problem on the border, and he reveals that Sir Eugene took them all out by himself, proving his skills are good. Suddenly, Galfredik throws a dagger with all his might towards our protagonist to test him. Our boy deflects the attack with his sword in a swift movement, and the collision creates sparks. The weapon flies and hits the door with such force that it cracks the wood in half instantly. Galfredik then breaks into a sinister grin, looking very satisfied with what he saw, and he apologizes for his previous rudeness to our protagonist who was in the room. He explains that the guy's pale skin made him look like a pampered young master with no experience, and the knight asks if our hero wants to show what he can really do, so a duel is organized in the castle courtyard to test Eugene's skills. The news spreads quickly, and a crowd forms to watch the fight that's about to begin. Everyone comments that Galfredik is ranked third, and that he's a real monster. A spectator says he doesn't know the opponent, but already feels sorry for the poor guy who's going to fight. Our protagonist just faces the challenge calmly while the crowd pities him. On the other side, Galfredik smiles excitedly and prepares for the fight with his sword in hand. The red-haired knight seems very confident in his victory against the newcomer. With a focused look, the man prepares to show his power to the watching crowd. Eugene, on the other hand, remains calm and serious, waiting for the battle to start without being flustered. He faces his opponent with his red eyes glowing from under his dark mask. In the blink of an eye, the fight is over, and Galfredik is on the ground, defeated and shocked. The judge then raises his hand and yells for them to prepare for the start of the combat. With a loud bell ringing, the judge finally gives the signal for the great combat to begin. Without wasting a single second, our protagonist charges at his opponent with full force, and their swords cross, starting a contest of strength, and after the clash, both retreat. Galfredik then taunts Eugene into the fight, seeming quite excited, and the two begin to exchange blows frantically. Raven gets excited and says Eugene is pressuring Galfredik, but Pardek says he's just testing him. He explains that Galfredik is letting himself be pushed back, and defends against the attacks with ease. Realizing that Eugene's swordsmanship is rougher than expected and he can't read his style, and he notes it's not a refined technique but a raw and wild fighting style. With that, he realizes something important and asks if Eugene lied about being a real knight, saying his swordsmanship is crude and he relies only on his physical strength. Eugene then replies that swordsmanship isn't everything for a knight, and tells Galfredik to shut up, launching into an attack. Galfredik then says that if Eugene defeats him, he'll shut his trap on the spot. With that, they begin a devastating exchange of blows in a very balanced battle, but Galfredik manages to unbalance our protagonist, and then charges forward upon seeing the opening. Galfredik attacks thinking victory is certain, but Eugene barely blocks it. With the force of the blow, Eugene is thrown far away, and slams into the wall. In the crowd, the blonde mercenary's jaw drops, and he asks if the opponent was knocked out. Eugene can't believe what just happened, and is surprised by the result, wondering who this guy is. Then he charges at Galfredik, who defends the blow with difficulty, and is shocked by the force, and thinks impressed that he learns things very very quickly, and the fight continues at full steam. Our protagonist then tries to attack, and Galfredik prepares to counterattack. Their swords clash, and after the collision both break. They resort to fighting with their bare hands, and as they test their strength, Galfredik wonders how someone smaller than him can have so much brute force, and he admits his strength is overwhelmingly superior to his own. But Galfredik reveals he wasn't fighting with his full power yet, and then says that in experience he has the advantage, pulling Eugene and unbalancing him. Eugene is then surprised by his fighting stance, and falls hard to the ground. Galfredik then moves in to finish him with a blow. On the ground, Eugene can't believe it, but he snaps back to reality and slams the ground, rolling to the side and dodging the attack, and then grabs Galfredik's hand, and copies his move, causing Galfredik to lose his balance. Seeing that, Galfredik thinks his movements aren't precise, but he has a survival instinct, and wonders where the heck this weird guy came from. Admitting he's lost, our protagonist then lands a punch right in the middle of Galfredik's face, sending him flying against the wall. The impact is so powerful it breaks the wall, and Galfredik is left on the ground completely defeated. The fight's judge is in shock and announces that the great winner of that night was none other than Nightyan Eugene. The crowd goes wild and wonders who this incredibly strong and unknown knight is. The blonde mercenary celebrates and yells to everyone that this man is their group's knight. Meanwhile, on the ground, the red-haired knight is still trying to recover from our boy's final blow. With a look of pure determination, he doesn't seem to accept defeat so easily. To everyone's surprise, the man gets up and faces our protagonist in the middle of the arena. With an aura of anger, his eye glows red, and he seems to want another fight. Our protagonist just stares back at him with a calm expression, showing no fear. The knight then approaches and asks our hero to fight him one more time, but he raises our boy's arm and asks for a round of applause for the knight's winner. The entire crowd starts chanting our protagonist's name in one voice. The blonde noble is furious and can't believe what just happened. Then the scene changes to a luxurious banquet with several smiling and well-dressed servants. Our protagonist is at a lavish banquet prepared just for him in the castle. A butler explains that Kamara ordered them to take good care of him for the dungeon mission. The servants even closed the curtains for his sensitive skin and offered a glass of wine. The fairy wonders if he'll get a stomachachi, and our hero accepts but dismisses the servants. The butler is embarrassed by the request, but our protagonist insists and sends a message. With a serious look, he asks to let them know he prefers to be alone because of his past. The next day, Kamara appears all excited and asks our hero if he slept well. Our boy replies that he did, and the noble notes that he rejected all the help that was sent. Suddenly, the blonde mercenary appears and bows happily, saying he liked the news. Galfredik also shows up, calling him a friend, but our hero tells him to stop clinging to him. The red-haired knight then asks if he slept well and complains that his face hurt all night. He shows his bruised face, and our protagonist wonders if the guy wants another beating. The man invites him to train, and one of the mercenaries even asks if he can watch up close. Eugene thinks the outcome was good, but he's still not used to so many people crowding him. Our hero says he wants to get beat up again, but Galfredik replies they'll only know by fighting. Suddenly, a young man with brown hair appears with a smile on his face and looks at the group. He calls our hero by name, leaving all the mercenaries very confused by the situation. Then the guy asks if our protagonist has been doing well all this time. The scene changes and we see someone begging for their life in a dark and gloomy room in the castle. At that, a scream of pure terror echoes through the place as a shadow is cast on the wall. A man is on the floor, all beaten up, while another says none of this would have happened. Bertel says that if the bastard son had been eliminated, the red-eyed knight wouldn't be there. With a furious look, he yells that if that had happened, his plan wouldn't have gone wrong. The man apologizes, but Bertel scoffs, saying the mercenaries were defeated by wolves. He yells that the man didn't notice this and asks if his eyes are just for decoration. With a cold look, the blonde noble says that if the man is useless for this, he's worthless. Then he says that getting rid of him won't be a problem, and threatens him with a sharp dagger. The man lets out a scream of pain as the other servants watch the scene in terror. With the floor all stained, the noble wonders what he should do from now on. He thinks he can't just eliminate someone who has already managed to get into the castle. Suddenly, Bertel has a brilliant idea to get rid of our hero once and for all. He thinks it's the only way, and that with this method, the mess will be very easy to clean up. Then the scene shows us young Pellet on the ground, but with a very determined look. Our protagonist asks if Bertel sent him to the dungeon that's about to open. Pellet says he came to the castle to perish, and now he's being sent to the dungeon. He remembers that the mercenaries who attacked him were sent by one of his brothers. Our hero reveals they never wanted the boy to reach the castle alive, but he says there is a way for young Pellet to survive all this, Yes, with that, our protagonist offers him the chance to become his servant in order to live. Our hero explains that the boy is 16 years old and can choose his own path. He can stay hidden, waiting for the end, or fight with all his might until the very last second. On the day the dungeon opens, no one has any idea what kind of monsters will appear. The objective is to clear a path, and if a strong monster appears, the plan is to retreat immediately. One of the porters is relieved he doesn't have to fight and see all that mess up close. He plans to pretend he's injured, as no one cares about the guys in the back. One of the porters says that if it gets dangerous, they can flee, but suddenly Bertel appears, asking for Pelid. The porter is terrified, and the blonde noble repeats angrily that he assigned the illegitimate son to that post. Scared, the man points and asks if he's talking about that boy who's talking to our hero. Pelid hands a snack to Eugene, wishing him a safe return, and the guy just accepts the gift. The blonde noble is furious and calls the young man an uncivilized brat who joined the group like a sneaky rat. Then he approaches, yelling Pelid's name, and says the boy was just slacking off over there. With an irritated look, Bertel asks if he's already forgotten what was said and tells him to grab his bag and get to his post. The young man is frightened by the order and starts to move to obey the noble immediately. Bertel then yells at the boy, asking if his ears are already failing for not obeying quickly. At that moment, our protagonist glares at the blonde noble with a serious and challenging look. The noble then grabs Pelid forcefully and yells at him to get back to his position immediately. But our hero grabs his hand firmly and with a cold voice tells him to take his hand off the boy. The noble is shocked and angry, realizing he heard something ridiculous from a mere knight. Our protagonist asks if he's crazy for sending a brat who's never fought into the dungeon. Bertel calls him rude and says he just wants to strengthen his brother, but our hero prepares for an attack. Bertel tells our hero to know his place and says he has no right to order the boy around, but our protagonist takes a step forward and says it's the noble who doesn't know his place. Then he reveals that the young man became his servant the day before, leaving the noble shocked. Pelid himself is completely surprised by the revelation and doesn't understand what happened. Our hero says that everyone there is a witness to what just happened between them. He warns that if anyone lays a finger on the boy, he will consider it a personal challenge. Eugene gets up close to Bertel and invites him to a fight if he wants to warm up first. The blonde noble is furious at the audacity and asks who gave permission for that. Galfredic says that taking another family's son will hinder the boy's future. One of the knights comments that the duel between our hero and Galfredic was amazing to watch. Another man laughs and says it would take a second lifetime to reach that level of power. Kamar appears and says he would also trust his younger brother to Sir Eugene. The noble adds that the boy is already an adult and can choose his own path. Our hero thinks that Pelid is the prey and that surviving is not easy for the weak. He concludes that if you can't get strong, the only way is to join a pack. Kamara then invites Pelid to see his quarters while our hero thinks about the survival method of the weakest. A scout approaches and reports that there are no monsters nearby and that nothing has escaped through the dungeon tunnels. With the report in hand, the man authorizes the opening, and our protagonist prepares to enter. With a loud noise, the huge stone door of the dungeon finally begins to open for the group. The red-haired knight then looks seriously at the soldiers and warns each of them to survive on their own. The men, including young Pelid, prepare for battle with very tense and nervous expressions. Then our protagonist and Galfredic lead the advance into the dark and dangerous dungeon. Outside, Kamara says goodbye to Pelid while the boy wishes our hero good luck. Inside the dark and cold cave, the group of knights advances cautiously through a narrow tunnel. Suddenly, a pack of goblins appears out of nowhere and attacks one of the soldiers, who screams in terror. The man continues to scream for his life, but Galfredic arrives and finishes off the monsters in the blink of an eye. The soldier can hardly believe he survived, but the red-haired knight curses him out, calling them all idiots. With his face full of rage, he yells at the soldiers, asking if they can't even maintain formation. The knight then shoves the man back into place and tells everyone to get back in line. Next, he orders the archers in the center to defend the ceiling from the climbing goblins. The red-haired knight yells not to let the monsters break their formation. One of the soldiers despairs and thinks it was crazy to volunteer for this suicide mission. Terrified, the man decides he needs to get out of there as fast as possible to survive. But as he turns to flee, he comes face to face with a group of grinning goblins in the darkness. With nowhere to run, the soldier lets out a scream of terror as he's attacked by the creatures. Our hero then appears and calls him a fool, asking if he thought there wouldn't be monsters on the way. The red-haired knight grabs him tightly and yells that the safest option is for them to stick together. Then he tells everyone to raise their swords and hold their positions at all costs. In the middle of the battle, the soldier screams desperately as the goblins advance relentlessly. The red-haired man thinks the soldier's condition is pathetic and wonders how they'll conquer the dungeon. One of the men warns that the monsters are coming in a horde again from the front of the group. Suddenly, another soldier yells that more creatures are coming from the group's rear. Our protagonist then steps forward sword and says he'll take care of the monsters behind them. The red-haired knight tries to stop him, saying it's too dangerous to go to the rear alone, but our hero doesn't listen and advances with determination to face the monsters by himself. In the darkness of the dungeon, sounds of battle echo, keeping the red-haired knight on high alert. Suddenly, everything goes silent and the man turns, completely shocked by the situation. Our hero then uses a dark ability that creates a vortex on the cave floor. With that, one of the goblins drops lifeless to the ground after our boy's surprise attack. The red-haired knight then yells for Partek to follow our protagonist and cover his back. The man is stunned by the speed at which our hero advanced alone through the cave. He can't believe the guy's agility and efficiency in the midst of combat. Eugene then returns and says he finished them all off and found a strange plant on the way. The red-haired knight laughs and thinks how he doesn't even know a common luminous herb from the region. He has incredible skill, but the plant in his hand had already completely withered. After the battle, several soldiers are injured and receiving medical care at the camp. Pellet approaches and informs that the collection of mana stones has been successfully completed. Our protagonist complains that there are too few stones for the number of monsters they defeated. He then notices that unlike the stone he absorbed before, these are all blue and small. The fairy Miriam appears and explains that the quality of the stone is proportional to the monster's power. Pellet asks about the stones from wild monsters, and the fairy explains that the gator was special. She continues, saying that monsters like that are rare and brags that he stole her territory. Our hero thinks he got lucky, while the fairy says that coming in here to impress nobles is useless. But the little fairy says there might be high-rank monsters, and at that, our boy feels something strange. The red-haired knight complains that the rest is over and tells everyone to prepare for battle. He calls the soldiers weak and warns that he and Eugene will lead the attack against the monsters. Our protagonist thinks it's a bad idea to lead on his first time, and the redhead tells him to try harder. Then the red-haired knight senses that the next enemies to come are much stronger. They warn that up ahead, powerful monsters use goblins as their foot soldiers. This means they will face at least mid-rank creatures inside the dungeon. The soldiers get nervous, as beyond this point is the center of the dungeon and the danger increases. Our hero is certain that a high-rank monster awaits them in the depths of the cave. In a flashback, our boy remembers eating the red stone from the swamp master. With that, he recalls gaining a very significant ability after that day in the forest. Curious, he wonders if he'll gain a new power if he consumes another one of those stones. Our protagonist detects more than 50 footsteps at 100 meters and 3 heavier ones behind. The red-haired knight is impressed by the guy's detection ability and lets out an ho-ho. Then Galfredik hands him his spear and asks if our hero wants to throw it at the enemies. With a swift movement, our protagonist prepares to launch the weapon with all his might. The spear flies like a red bolt of light, cutting through the air towards the monsters in the darkness. The attack hits one of the monsters dead on, and then Galfredik orders all his troops to advance into battle. He yells for the soldiers to follow and support the leaders at the front of the group. Meanwhile, our hero is already in the thick of it, mercilessly cutting down a giant monster. A soldier wonders if Eugene isn't luring them into a trap with his speed. In a flash, our protagonist lands a blow on the monster, and then pierces the creature's head and finishes it off for good. After that, he moves on to the next one and drives his sword into its head. With his face covered in blood, our hero looks like a wild beast in the middle of the battle. That day, the soldiers burned into their minds the image of the knight they so admired. Then he advances and grabs one of the giant monsters with his hand covered in a black aura. With absurd strength, he holds the creature without any difficulty, showing his power. His swordsmanship was elegant and just, with a nobility that never wavered in the face of danger, but his fighting style was different from anything the knights knew and admired. In fact, it was far from their admiration. It was something more brutal and terrifying. After the slaughter, our protagonist is covered in blood amidst the fallen enemies. After the battle, the group finally stops to rest in a makeshift camp in the dungeon. Several soldiers are injured, and the ground is covered with monster bodies everywhere. The red-haired knight notices that most of the troops have lost the strength to continue advancing. He understands it's not physical fatigue, but mental, after everything they've witnessed. With that, the red-haired man thinks it's impossible to keep advancing with the group. So he approaches and says they've already met their goals and asks if they can go back now. But our protagonist says his energy is intact and that it would be a shame to turn back now. Eugene says if they want to go back, they can, and the red-haired knight yells that he has no choice but to continue. Our protagonist then steps on a fallen monster on the ground and makes an important decision. He tells Galfredik to lead the main group out of the dungeon, leaving the man in shock. At this, Eugene announces he will continue the exploration only with his trusted mercenaries. The red-haired knight realizes he noticed the soldiers' fatigue and showed consideration for them. With that, Galfredik thinks that this guy makes him rethink the true meaning of being a knight. Then our hero and his small group advance through a dark corridor full of spiderwebs. The blonde mercenary trembles with fear and complains that he didn't want to be there. He tries to calm himself by thinking that if something goes wrong, our hero will handle everything. But suddenly the guy trips and falls hard on the stone floor of the dark cave. He looks to the side outside and sees something terrifying that leaves him completely paralyzed with fear. On the ground was a giant crushed spider, and the guy wonders if there are more of them around. Suddenly, the group is surrounded by a swarm of giant spiders with glowing red eyes. They were giant cave spiders, a monster that melts its prey with an acidic venom. The blonde mercenary lets out a scream of terror as the creatures leap on top of him. Partek yells that there are too many enemies and they need to fall back now, but our hero questions the idea of fleeing. Then, without a second thought, our protagonist charges with his sword against the swarm of giant spiders. With his eyes glowing red, he says that this number of monsters is no problem for him. The blonde mercenary yells for them to join Eugene, while Partek is already in the middle of the fight with the spiders. The battle intensifies and our protagonist advances, cutting down the creatures with no apparent difficulty. Suddenly, the blonde guy is surrounded by spiders and starts screaming desperately for help. One of the giant creatures prepares to attack the guy, who is paralyzed with fear, unable to react. But our hero appears in a flash and cuts the spider in half, saving the mercenary's life. The young man is completely in shock and doesn't understand what just happened right in front of him. With a serious look and red eyes, our protagonist faces the guy who is still paralyzed on the ground. Then he simply shoves the mercenary aside to get him out of the way of the other spiders. Our hero then returns to the battle and starts finishing off the rest of the creatures at an incredible speed. The guy wonders if he's a monster and suggests they go back now, that they've done enough. He tries to get Partek's attention, who seems to ignore him completely and remains focused on the fight. The mercenary leader just stands there, watching the scene in silence, completely stunned by the power he witnessed. Partek thinks shocked that he's found a superior rank monster there and that he wasn't prepared. He recognizes the absurd size and realizes it's a higher rank giant cave spider, a lord, a powerful creature that commands the other monsters in the dungeon with its strength. The giant spider opens its terrifying mouth, showing sharp fangs and a forked tongue. The blonde mercenary panics and yells for them to fall back, as they have no chance against a lord. Then our protagonist calls for Partek and the blonde mercenary with a serious and focused look on the battle. He orders them both to retreat immediately and with a determined look says the prey is his. Partek understands the order and feels a strange sensation, as if control of his body has been stolen. He feels all his nerves screaming to flee that place as fast as he can. The fairy Miriam scoffs, saying their instincts have succumbed to the class difference with her master. She confirms that the Spider Lord is even stronger than the Swamp Master our hero defeated. Our protagonist understands that the monster's Mana Stone will also be much larger and more powerful. The giant creature then opens its mouth in a terrifying scream, preparing to attack. With a confident smile, our hero says that the harder the chest, the more exciting the treasure. Suddenly, a small spider descends on a thread of web towards a cup in a room. The small spider jumps to defend itself, but our hero cuts it in half with a quick attack. With a gesture, he shows off his new ability, which creates a thread of energy from his fingers. The second ability he gained was the power to camouflage his skin and appearance. With camouflage, he can create perfect human skin and protect himself from the sunlight. He protects his skin with the first ability and covers it with the second to be able to walk during the day. Now he no longer needs to worry about avoiding sunlight and can even take off his mask. In a courtyard, the red-haired knight and the blonde mercenary train while the others drink. At a banquet, a woman asks why he hid such a handsome face for so long. Another woman compliments his beauty, and a third says she heard he defeated a giant spider. The fairy Miriam is amused by the attention and asks him to tell them his heroic story. One of the ladies compliments his appearance and asks if he has any elf ancestors in his family. Our hero thinks the situation has become even more complicated with all this attention, but suddenly he has an idea and realizes that all of this finally makes sense to him. Galfredic thinks it's no wonder he had such sharp eyes in the darkness of the dungeon. He remembers his agile movements and the superhuman strength he used to throw the spear. Our hero thinks with a serious look that he already knew the red-haired knight was no ordinary human. Galfredic gets excited and yells that he never imagined our protagonist had elf blood, but he wonders how the guy managed to hide his appearance for so long in that region. With a smirk, our hero starts to make up an excuse to trick the knight. He then says, with a seductive expression, that he never tried to hide his appearance on purpose. The women at the table and even the blonde mercenary are completely charmed by the answer. The red-haired knight comments that he says that without even changing his expression, leaving the ladies sighing. Our protagonist thinks that now he can use the elf ancestor excuse whenever they get suspicious, and remembers that what he gained from the magic stone wasn't just a new ability. When the tattoo disappeared, memories he had never seen before suddenly flooded his mind. He saw himself lying in an unknown place while gentle hands held his with affection. In a strange place full of ringing bells, everyone was looking at him attentively. He wonders who the woman in his memories was, but then questions if they were even memories. The guy, who doesn't remember his past, can only recall one single thing in his mind. Suddenly, a voice calls him Sir Eugene, and he snaps out of his thoughts, startled by the noise. The blonde mercenary appears out of nowhere and begs our hero to save him from Galfredic. The red-haired knight grabs him tightly and complains that he was dead weight for our protagonist. The guy guy yells that it's because our hero isn't human and that any normal person would have run. Frederick gets angry and says he's gonna put him in special training for a long time. Our protagonist thinks that the only thing he remembers is his name, but now he has a premonition. He closes his eyes and concentrates on his thoughts as the party continues in the background. He believes that if he erases the tattoos, he'll be able to find out who he really was in the past, and not something fake like a knight or someone with elf blood running through their veins. In a room, Lord Taiwan receives the news that the dungeon has been successfully subjugated. A young man introduces himself as Krima, Gaffredic's third son, leaving our hero surprised. Then our protagonist bows, and the Lord says he must have had a very difficult job. With a gesture, the man asks to deliver something important to our hero, who is there. It was a document to verify his status that will secure his position as a member of the Eugene family. The fairy Miriam celebrates, and our hero thanks the Lord for the gift he just received. Suddenly, Lord Tiwan starts coughing violently, and Bertel screams desperately for his father. Lord Tiwan says he cannot rest in peace with his second son's ambitions. Kamara then assures him that he will lead the territory his father built his whole life well. But the old noble says the territory is just dust, and that he must remember something. He continues, saying a lord must always look after and lead the people, not the lands. At that, Lord Taiwan's hand goes limp, and he finally departs from this world forever. Our protagonist thinks he doesn't know what the lord was like, but many people are mourning his departure. He continues to watch the mourning scene from a distance, next to the red-haired knight, but not everyone there shares the same feelings like Bertel, who seems quite irritated. Galfredic says his goodbyes, as he needs to leave, and Kamara says he understands his commitments. Then the red-haired knight asks if our hero is really going to stay there at the castle. Eugene reveals he wants to go to the dungeon one more time, as it would be a waste not to. The man laments and says that a certain Count Evergrow would have liked him very much. He then extends his hand to our protagonist, who is a bit confused by the gesture. Galfredic smiles and says it was an honor to compete with a knight as strong as him. Our hero shakes his hand, and the redhead says he hopes not to meet him as an enemy next time. The two shake hands in a gesture of respect and rivalry, sealing a silent pact. The blonde mercenary wishes Gaffredic a good journey, and our hero tells Protect to get ready to leave. Pellet is confused and asks what the knight he served was riding on the way. One of the female mercenaries explains with a funny gesture that knights usually ride horses. Partek reveals they are going to the trading company to sell the monster items. Pellet gets excited and says he will help diligently, but our hero questions the word help. With a serious look, our protagonist says he won't need his help for a long time. The young man is shocked and asks what he means by those direct and cold words. In a bustling port, Pellet is confused as workers shout orders around him. He wonders why he's carrying boxes in an unfamiliar place instead of helping. The scene takes us to Marin, the largest trading city in the kingdom of Kalar. With a large port, gulls fly over the blue sea as ships and people fill the port with life. A merchant is shocked and asks if all that loot was brought by a single knight. The blonde mercenary brags, and a man recognizes the name of the dungeon in Tiwan's territory. The blonde mercenary then tells one of the merchants not to touch the items without proper care. Pellet looks at the sky and thinks about what's happening as the sun shines brightly. He thinks our protagonist's negotiations are taking quite a while to finish. Inside the building, our hero is sitting in a meeting room, waiting for the result. A man named Billmore from the Phelan Trading Company assures him he'll take care of everything. Our protagonist thinks he didn't expect Partek to introduce him to such a large company. He continues to think that this will be very useful for someone who doesn't know the contact networks. Suddenly, the meeting room door bursts open with a loud noise, and someone enters. A man in glasses and an elegant suit appears and asks who this Sir Eugene is. Our protagonist just stares at him with a serious look while Partek goes on alert. The mercenary leader warns that the situation could get very difficult from here on out. He explains that the man is the secretary to the company's vice manager and has a lot of power. Partek is sure they've come to try to buy the spoils for a lower price. Our hero then thinks that if he wants a stable partner, he needs to act very cautiously. Billmore tries to argue, but the secretary tells him to step aside and not challenge someone he can't beat. Then the man in glasses turns and says that rumors about him have spread from the port. The secretary says they are just rumors to inflate the value of the products, a rookie's strategy. He then invites our hero to go with him and sign a special contract with the vice manager, but suddenly the man in glasses feels a strange pressure and starts to sweat with fear. Our protagonist glares at him with his glowing red eyes, and the secretary wonders what this pressure is. Trying to hide his fear, he introduces himself as Grail and says it's a great opportunity. Our hero asks what kind of opportunity he's talking about, with a very serious expression. The man explains it's the chance to sell the spoils on much better terms than usual. Our protagonist keeps pressing and asks what he means by better terms. Grail stammers and says the vice manager herself would handle everything personally for him. Terrified, the man apologizes and says he never meant to disrespect him with his words. He then says his goodbyes and runs out of the meeting room, completely terrified by the situation. situation. Billmore is moved and thanks our hero for refusing the contract for his sake. He promises full support and says if our protagonist needs anything, he just has to ask. The merchant gets excited and asks when the negotiation process can really begin. Our hero then stands up and, with a serious look, tells him to step outside so they can start right now. Grill tells the vice manager that his offer was rejected and that the rumors were true. The woman says it's common for knights to cause problems because of their honor and pride. With a wicked smile, they should cause problems their own way with their power. She continues, saying the opponent is a poor knight who doesn't even have a mount. Then the orange-haired woman orders them to give him a gift he can't refuse. Pellet is shocked and asks if our hero wants him to stay and sell the spoils. Our protagonist confirms and tells him to sell all the items he brings to the merchant. The young man doesn't understand and asks why he needs to stay behind again this time. He wonders if his skills are still insufficient and offers to train more. Our hero then asks what the true role of a squire is, leaving the guy thoughtful. Pellet replies that it's to help his knight in battle and in daily life with his tasks. With that, our protagonist explains that his duty as a squire is to assist in his daily life. He continues, saying his mission is to sell the spoils from battles to earn money. Our hero tells him to discuss the details with Billmore, who will teach him a lot about business. The young man then thinks that, if it weren't for our protagonist, he would have been long gone. With a determined look, the young man thinks that complaining would be a disgrace to himself. Our protagonist promises that one day he will teach him to fight when they have enough money. The young man is shocked by the promise, but his eyes shine with hope and happiness. With a smile and his hand on his chest, he seems determined to carry out his mission with loyalty. Then Pellet declares that he will obey his knight's orders with all his strength. Our hero and his group say goodbye to Billmore and Pellet and set off on their next journey. Walking through the city, our protagonist wonders if money always runs out so quickly. The fairy Miriam laments, and Partek says they can get the money back quickly. Our hero then stops, and a magical glow appears beside him, catching everyone's attention. Before them, a complete and gleaming suit of plate armor appears as if by magic. Partek says that armor is every knight's dream, but our hero just thinks it's expensive. He explains that it's such an expensive item that even wealthy knights pass it down through generations. Suddenly, the blonde mercenary comes running and yelling desperately for the group's captain. With a panicked expression, he reveals that a horde of monsters has appeared on the outskirts of the city. He continues, saying the monsters are trying to enter the city and the guilds can barely contain them. Partek says it's better for our hero to participate in the subjugation, but he asks why he should. Then the blonde mercenary runs up and starts explaining the reason with great excitement. He yells that, unlike a dungeon with an owner, this one has no fee, and Marin is a city of merchants. With his eyes shining, the guy adds that they're going to make a ton of money on this mission. Our protagonist agrees and with a serious look, tells them to go, as there's no reason to hesitate. But suddenly a voice yells for them to wait, and the group turns, not understanding what's going on. It was Secretary Griel, out of breath and leaning on a horse, leaving everyone confused by the scene. The man in glasses introduces himself and reveals that the vice manager sent a war horse as a gift. The animal was magnificent with black silky fur, divine muscles, and a certified pedigree. Our hero is suspicious and asks if the vice manager really sent that gift for him. Griel shrinks under the intimidating gaze and stammers that it's not for any special reason. But our protagonist continues to stare at the man with a very serious and suspicious expression. Terrified, the secretary insists it's just a small gesture of goodwill on her part. With that, Eugene simply mounts the horse and tells the man to send his thanks to her. The fairy then celebrates and tells them to go sweep up some money in that battle. The blonde mercenary asks what they'll do now, and Partek yells at the guy, irritated. Angrily, the mercenary leader tells everyone to run to catch up with our hero in the battle. Griel just watches the group of mercenaries running to the fight with a serious expression. Meanwhile, in the forest on the outskirts of the city, a group of goblins is gathered and on alert. Suddenly, the creatures hear a strange noise and become confused in the middle of the dark woods. The sound was the warhorse galloping at high speed through the dense and perilous forest. Our protagonist passes like a flash and cuts one of the goblins in half without even looking back. The fairy says the horde is huge, and Eugene thinks the guild members must already be gone. With a cold and determined look, our hero just says that's great for his plans. Then he continues riding and reveals he doesn't like sharing his loot one bit. The speed is so great that leaves from the trees fly everywhere as he passes. The warhorse runs non-stop, crushing everything it sees in its path. The sun shines brightly through the leaves of the trees as he advances through the dense forest. With the reins in his hand, our protagonist concentrates on getting to the battle as quickly as possible. The scene then shows us an intense fight between several adventurers and a horde of monsters. A blonde knight yells at the monsters that they shall not pass him unless they defeat him. With that, the goblins charge at the guy with their red eyes glowing. His horse gets spooked and ends up throwing the knight to the ground in the panic of the moment. Then the animal flees desperately, leaving the man behind alone against the horde. On the ground, the man introduces himself as Madrika and swears in the name of the city of Marin. But suddenly he looks up and is shocked to be surrounded by monsters in the forest. The goblins are also confused and look up, not understanding what's happening. The knight then screams in terror and starts begging the creatures for his life. With a desperate blow, the man attacks one of the creatures to try to survive the attack. At that moment, our protagonist arrives on his warhorse, ready for battle. With a swift movement, he starts finishing off all the goblins that were surrounding the guy. The force of the attack is so great that the man is thrown back by the impact of his blade. Our hero creates a circle of destruction around the fallen knight on the forest floor. Safe, the man thanks him and asks the name of the mysterious knight who saved him. Our protagonist just stares at him with a serious look and continues his relentless attack. The blonde knight attacks another creature with a powerful blow, showing his skill. With a smile, the man asks for his savior's name while fighting the monsters. Our protagonist questions if the name matters and says it won't make a difference if they both perish. The knight laughs and agrees with his logic as the battle continues around them. Then the man says that if they survive, he'll ask for his name again. In the city, the knight tells the crowd how hundreds of goblins attacked them in the forest. He brags, saying he fought bravely alongside the mysterious knight without any fear. With a smile, the man says that in the end, they were victorious and protected the city. A curious man asks which knight he's talking about, and the guy smiles maliciously. With a serious look, he reveals to everyone that the great hero's name is Yan Eugene. The crowd goes wild, and various rumors about our hero's deeds begin to spread. At this, everyone in the city starts chanting our protagonist's name in one voice. From a window, a man watches the scene and notes that the entire city is acclaiming the guy. He thinks that the more famous our hero becomes, the harder it will be to control him in the future. The mayor asks if they can just leave things as they are, and Priscilla says everything is under control. The red-haired woman says she expected his name to spread, because the greater the honor, the easier the fall. She then asks her grandfather if he's heard of our hero's attendant, the one who delivers the goods. With a smile, the woman reveals that the guy is actually illegitimate son of House Taiwan. The mayor is surprised by the revelation and asks what she means by that information. She says if they can get both of them, they can form ties with someone who could become the head of the house. The grandfather smiles and understands that her intention is to secure the loyalty of a knight who protects an heir. With that, the man decides he will send a gift himself to show his gratitude to the city's hero. The woman thanks him, and he warns that he will put her down as the recommender and that she should use this wisely. Then the scene shows us a large, luxurious building during the dark night in the city of Marin. In a room, the woman drinks tea and thinks that a merchant knows only one path to follow in life. With a wicked smile, she concludes her thought by saying the way is to dig a well and just wait. Our protagonist then walks down a corridor without showing any resistance or suspicion. With a quick movement, he opens the handle of a large wooden door in the hallway. In the room, the woman waits for him and thinks they will drink every drop she gets from the well she dug. With a smile on her face, the orange-haired woman welcomes our hero, who has just arrived. In a new and imposing suit of armor, the woman calls him the hero who saved the city of Marin. Our protagonist enters the room, and the woman introduces herself as Priscilla, the vice manager of the place. While drinking her tea, she analyzes him and doubts that he's really the knight who defeated a troll. She thinks he looks nothing like the knights she used to imagine. With a smile, the woman compliments the armor and says it was made in the best workshop in the city. The armor was a mix of iron and ogre bone, so tough that not even a dragon's fang could pierce it. Our hero then says that with the new armor, the next dungeon raid will be much easier. He also thanks her for the food and says he now expects better results from his mercenaries. The woman smiles maliciously and says that, since that's the case, she would like to make a proposal. But our protagonist stands up and says he's busy, leaving the woman completely shocked. He warns that he will visit her again when the subjugation of the House Taiwan dungeon is complete. Our hero then reveals that their contract only applies to the products of the current expedition. With an annoyed look, the woman hears that he will focus on collecting magic stones next time. Priscilla then screams desperately for him to wait a moment as our hero walks away. Our protagonist just stops for a moment but doesn't turn to face the woman again. The orange-haired woman says there's still something for them to discuss at that moment. Our protagonist asks what that would be, and she says he can't pretend forever. The men explain that the armor and the horse he got cost much more than the loot. With a smile, the woman asks if he never learned that everything in the world has a price. She then threatens him, saying she can spread the word that the hero is a knight without honor. Our protagonist just stares at her with his red eyes glowing in the darkness of the room. The woman challenges him to argue and defend himself against the accusation she just made, but to her surprise, our hero just smiles and says he finds the situation amusing. He says they gave him gifts he didn't ask for and are now demanding payment for everything. With a dark look, he wonders if mere merchants think they can threaten him. The woman and her men are in shock while our hero's mercenaries give a smirk. Eugene says he already has a contract and doesn't care what they say as long as they keep buying. He agrees that everything has a price and tells the woman to say whatever she wants about him. Our hero warns that this way, she will understand the true meaning of the word price. Then he says it will look like the company joined forces with Marin to persecute the city's hero. He says if that happens, no knight will help Marin, and with that he announces his departure. Partik then turns to the vice manager and says her audacity is quite pitiful. The orange-haired woman thinks that if the approach had been different, their relationship would be better. One of the men beside her calls her name, scared, while she remains furious. Then the woman calls our hero by name and asks him to wait a moment before leaving. To everyone's surprise, Priscilla bows and humbly offers her deepest apologies. She admits she went too far and, as penance, wishes to start their relationship from scratch. With that, Priscilla says she will keep the contract and add clauses for his safety. The woman reflects that she has seen knights lower themselves for money, but that our hero is different. She concludes that our protagonist is too dangerous to play with and that she made a mistake. The woman thinks that her merchant instincts won't allow her to ignore him. With a determined smile, she seems to have made an important decision for the business. Our protagonist then sits down and says he can at least hear her proposal, but with a serious look, he warns that it better be a tempting offer to justify the wait. The orange-haired woman thanks him with a relieved smile for his mercy. The fairy says the armor is just for show, and the blonde mercenary comments on the new equipment. The little fairy cheers, saying he's the best. While Partek praises the contract he secured, our protagonist asks if he thinks so, and the man confirms, saying the company is huge. He explains that with Marin as their base they have hundreds of branches, and trade with demonic kingdoms. Partek says the proposal of unlimited access to dungeons is bold and better than being a noble. The mercenary leader praises the move, but our hero says he only did it because he got annoyed. Suddenly, someone yells that wearing flashy armor doesn't make him a real knight. A bald old man scoffs and wonders if with that pretty face he even knows how to hold a sword. The fairy gets irritated by the insult, but our protagonist remains calm as they call him out. Then Kamara appears and greets him, saying he arrived just in time for the mission. The noble corrects himself and asks if he should call him Lord Taiwan, but our hero says there's no need. Kamara says his brother hired new mercenaries, but something seems very strange. He remembers that the previous group that was wiped out by wolves was made up of very bad people. The blonde noble adds that the new mercenaries look strangely familiar. With a serious look, our protagonist analyzes the situation carefully, paying attention to details. With that, Kamara reveals that he would like our hero to serve as the commander of the subjugation. But suddenly the bald mercenary interrupts him and approaches the noble with a serious look. The man then asks if, should our protagonist perish in the dungeon, he becomes the commander. Our hero's group is furious and Partik yells that this is absurd. The mercenary defends himself, saying he doesn't like to say it, but the mission is no picnic. He continues, explaining that in the dungeon, life is worthless, and they need to be prepared. Our protagonist then accepts the plan and says he'll count on him, leaving the man shocked. Eugene agrees that if he perishes, the bald guy takes over, and tells everyone to get ready for the mission. The little fairy tries to warn him about the man, but our protagonist just says he already knows everything. Kamara confirms that Bertel hired the mercenaries to get rid of him inside the dungeon, but watching things not go as planned for his enemy could be very interesting. With a wicked smile, our hero thinks that this whole situation is going to be a lot of fun. Inside the dungeon, a strange creature with a body of water prepares to attack the group. Without a second thought, our protagonist charges and cuts the monster with a quick blow. The battle begins, and our hero leads the advance against the creatures in the dark dungeon. Our protagonist continues the battle in the dungeon, eliminating several goblins with his sword. With a precise strike, he finishes off another creature, showing his strength in combat. The bald mercenary observes the fight and thinks that our hero's reputation is no exaggeration. He notes that the guy is taking down dozens of enemies by himself without needing help. For the group, it's like being behind a giant shield with a sense of security. With a wicked look, the man thinks he needs to stay alert to find a gap in the attack. He plans to use his poison-laced blade and just needs one chance to hit our hero. Our protagonist warns that from here on, only stronger monsters will appear in the dungeon. With a serious look, he tells only those who can handle it to follow him in the exploration. The bald mercenary smiles and thinks this is the perfect opportunity for his evil plan. The blonde mercenary and Partek try to go, but the bald man tells them to wait and stay there. The two are confused, and Partek says our protagonist must have some other plan in mind. With that, our hero and the other mercenaries advance alone through the dark and dangerous cave. He thinks that the last time he was there was with Galfredic, and that now it's not as interesting. Our protagonist remembers the smiling face of his former battle rival in the dungeon, and reflects that Galfredic was an excellent leader who always took the lead in battle. He concludes that with that kind of leadership, they would have cleared the dungeon without many problems. With that, our hero stops in the middle of the cave and can't help but wonder something. With a thoughtful look, he questions what Galfredic would do in a situation like this. and imagines how the red-haired knight would have dealt with the group of treacherous mercenaries in the dungeon. Suddenly, the bald man and his men surround him, and our hero says they've finally dropped the act. A blue energy appears and he says that if the men are so eager to perish, he will grant their wish. The mercenaries are startled to see a water creature appearing and preparing a magical attack. The elemental attacks with a water vortex that extinguishes all the torches and plunges the place into darkness. The men yell that they can't see anything, and the bald man tells them to stay calm and relight the torches. In total darkness, the confusion begins and glowing eyes appear, watching the entire group. One of the men is attacked and lets out a scream of pain without even being able to see who hit him. The bald leader realizes they are being attacked and tells his men to fight back with everything they have. But in the midst of the confusion, one of the mercenaries yells that they are attacking their own allies. With that, chaos fully sets in, and screams of pain echo through the dark and gloomy cave. In the total darkness, our protagonist observes the chaos with his red eyes glowing. The bald man despairs and thinks that the lack of light has created the perfect situation for our hero. With trembling hands, the man tries to light a flint, but he can't. Suddenly, everything goes silent, and the mercenary starts to break out in a cold sweat. Terrified, the man wonders why he can't hear anything anymore in the middle of the cave. At that moment, our protagonist appears in front of him without making a sound in the dark. With a cold voice, our hero asks if he really needs light, and the man is startled. Eugene then helps him light the flint and comments on how weak human eyes are. The light reveals all the fallen mercenaries, and our hero asks who the hunter is now. The bald man stares at our protagonist, completely shocked by the scene of slaughter. Terrified, the mercenary calls him a monster, and our hero shows his sharp fangs. Back at the castle, on a rainy night, our hero returns from his mission in the dungeon. Suddenly, Kamara appears in the hallway and desperately yells our protagonist's name. At that, Eugene appears with a calm expression and slowly descends the stairs. His red eyes glow in the darkness as he faces the confusion before him. Kamara runs towards him, alongside Bertel, and asks if the news he heard is true. Bertel asks what that noise is, and our hero says they can hear it from the one involved. On the floor, the bald mercenary is all beaten up and seems completely out of his mind. The two brothers are shocked, and Kamara yells the man's name, not believing the scene. Terrified, the bald man confesses with wide eyes that he tried to eliminate our hero. He then reveals he did everything under Bertel's orders, who smiles and says the guy has gone crazy. Kamara gets angry and yells at his brother, asking how far he intends to go with his plans. Bertel continues to question if the blonde noble will really believe the words of a madman. With a mocking smile, he grabs the man and asks if that's not right. Our protagonist then uses his power, and the bald man wonders how he dared to attack his master. The man yells that a useless person like him deserves this end and tries to take his own life in front of everyone. With that, he throws himself out the window to end his own life once and for all. Kamara desperately yells the man's name as he falls to his certain demise in the courtyard. The mercenary crashes into a statue in the castle courtyard, startling the servants. Bertel says he went mad in the dungeon and questions how his brother believes that, but Kamara glares at him and says that the strange one is Bertel, who seems relieved by the man's passing. With his face sweating, the blonde noble is speechless before his brother's accusation. Then he turns to our hero and accuses him of having no pride and of slandering him with delusions. With a cold look, our protagonist asks if on his honor as a knight, he is innocent. The blonde noble hesitates for a second but replies that of course, he is innocent of everything. Our hero then raises his gauntleted hand and prepares to make a proposal. With a challenging look, he invites him to a trial by combat in the middle of the courtyard. With a smile, our protagonist says they will wager their honor and the truth as knights. The blonde noble grits his teeth in anger, not believing the audacity of our hero's challenge. The news spreads, and everyone in the castle comments that he hired an assassin. One of the maids says he always causes trouble, but this time he went too far. One of the servants reveals that the target is Eugene, the knight the Lord recently hired. Bertel then faces our protagonist with a serious look and prepares for combat. With that, Kamara positions himself as the judge of this duel between the two knights in the courtyard. He announces that the truth will be decided in combat, and the winner will be right in the end. The truth, according to divine will be granted only to the great winner of the fight. With that, Bertel charges at our hero with a cry of fury. He attempts a powerful blow to end the fight at once with his sword, but our protagonist just watches him with a calm expression, unfazed by the attack. The blonde noble misses the blow, and his sword crashes against the ground, creating several sparks. He attacks again, but our hero defends the blow with ease, and the swords clash. The force of the impact between the two blades creates an explosion of sparks in the courtyard. Our protagonist realizes that Bertel's fighting style is very familiar to him. He then remembers seeing Bertel in the past yelling that he found the vampire he was looking for. Back then, our hero had to flee for over a decade from that persistent creature. Back in the present, Bertel is shocked as he realizes his opponent's true identity. The swords clash forcefully, and the sound of steel echoes throughout the battled courtyard. With that, Bertel grits his teeth and feels the crushing force of his opponent in the duel. In a swift move, our protagonist disarms the noble, who is left in shock. The noble's sword flies far away, and he falls to the ground, completely disarmed and defenseless. With a cold look, our hero tells him to pick up his sword to continue the fight. The blonde noble stares at him in terror with a smile of pure desperation on his face. Kamara thinks that his brother's swordsmanship was not bad or weak at all, but this time, even a layman could see the great difference between the two. It was obvious to everyone that our protagonist was overwhelmingly stronger. He had a power far superior to the noble's younger brother, who was watching the fight. Then our hero attacks with a quick and precise blow to finish the combat, but Kamara yells to stop and puts himself in front to protect his fallen brother. Our protagonist asks if that's enough for him with a serious look. The noble says the duel is not over yet, but he can't see his brother finished off. He then announces that Bertel can no longer fight and declares our hero the winner. But Bertel yells that he can still fight and that he will finish that scoundrel with his own hands. Kamara then tells him to stop and says the fight has already been decided between them. He tells his brother to act like a knight and admit his crime to reflect in prison. The blonde noble yells at his brother to shut up and asks what he did that was so wrong. With his sword in hand, he screams our protagonist's name in a fit of pure fury. Then he charges and yells that if our hero wasn't there, none of this would have happened. With his eyes glowing, he says he wouldn't have suffered this humiliation in front of everyone. Our protagonist then readies his sword, and a blue light reflects on its sharp blade. But for an instant, he seems confused by what's happening in the middle of the combat. He then wonders why his body is suddenly not obeying his commands. At this, Bertel's armor changes color, and he wonders what's happening to him. Kamara laments that his brother didn't take the last chance he gave him to surrender. With a swift move, our hero attacks Bertel with a final blow in the middle of the courtyard. The crowd and the mercenaries watch the scene in silence, completely shocked by the result. Our protagonist then stands over the noble's fallen body, ending the duel for good. Kamara just watches his foolish brother lying on the ground as our hero leaves the courtyard. With that, the scene changes to a sunny and lively port city. In a hallway, our protagonist walks and thinks that all of this was a waste. The fairy appears and says he used his first servant just to get a confession. He explains that the man was weak and would have been found out, so he was just a disposable tool. Our hero asks if he looks like someone who forgives betrayal, and the fairy calls him cold and heartless. The little fairy says a vampire needs slaves, but our boy says he doesn't need that. He thinks that turning weaklings into servants is just trouble and more work for him in the end. As he opens the door, he thinks of someone, but he overhears a conversation about Lord Galfredic. The woman and the man in the room are startled and say it's been 2 weeks since the last time. With a smile, the man and the orange-haired woman greet our hero who has just arrived. The man runs up to him and says he heard the last dungeon subjugation was a success. Our protagonist then grabs him and asks what happened to Lord Galfredic. The orange-haired woman just stares at him with a serious expression, saying nothing. Then she reveals that 2 weeks ago, the red-haired knight participated in a subjugation in a labyrinth. The woman reveals that they say he disappeared in the labyrinth, and that the searches found nothing. With a serious look, our protagonist understands he didn't return from the advanced monster zone. With that, our hero rides at full speed to Count Evergrove's territory without stopping. He arrives at a luxurious mansion and prepares to enter and find out what really happened. At the top of the stairs, a man greets him and compliments his appearance, saying he's heard a lot about him. Our protagonist thanks him for the compliment but seems to be in a hurry, and the man understands the situation. The guy introduces himself as Jabin, the eldest son of the family, and invites him inside. In the room, he says Galfredic's greed got the better of him, and he entered the upper levels alone. Our hero repeats the guy's words with a very suspicious look. Jabin confirms and reveals that his family hasn't been able to enter that place for over 100 years. The place is where the labyrinth's master lives, a dangerous place full of mysteries for everyone. Our protagonist asks what that is, and another man explains it's a being that rules the entire place. The black-haired man says the red-haired knight was blinded by desire and caused trouble. Jebin then introduces him as Sir Lujitz, the knight who led the group with Galfredic on the mission. The knight greets him and says he heard about the duel, and that the two have something in common. With a smile, the man reveals he won the family tournament, and that he defeated Galfredic. Jabin apologizes for the situation and says this shows how valuable the knight was. The guy then asks if our protagonist and the red-haired knight had a friendship. Our hero remembers his rival's way, and the fairy gets irritated at the memory of that scoundrel. Jabin promises full support for him coming for a friend and asks him to listen. He reveals that if someone disappears for more than a month in the labyrinth, they are declared deceased. With that, the guy warns that 3 weeks have passed, and there's only one left for the searches. He concludes by saying that if they don't find him in the next week, there will be no more hope. Our protagonist then stands up and says he will leave for the labyrinth immediately, but Jabin stops him, saying the place is no walk in the park, and that he needs to prepare. The guy then proposes that in 3 days, a subjugation team will be ready for the mission. He asks our hero to rest and recover from his journey until the day of departure. Jabin reveals they've hired a mage to help, and that he will be very useful in the exploration. The fairy wonders about this mage they're taking along to the labyrinth. In the city, the little fairy complains about the night and suggests setting the guy's nose on fire. With a serious look, our protagonist thinks there's more than one strange thing about this story. He then remembers the red-haired knight said he would receive a title from Count Evergrow. The man even invited him to come along and make a good impression on the local noble. Our hero finds it strange that he would be tested again with the title already secured and wonders why. He knows the knight wouldn't act out of greed and would have assembled a group cautiously. Suddenly, a man yells in the street that the Messiah is coming, and our hero looks at the scene. The preacher talks of a prophecy where the goddess of victory will descend to destroy the earth. He adds that the disaster has already begun with the trimmers and the animals perishing in the labyrinth. With that, the man mentions that a knight has disappeared, and the fairy wonders if it's their leader. An old man then yells for the people to throw calf's blood on their doors and offer the meat as a sacrifice. The preacher finishes by saying that with this, the Messiah will come to save the red, stained land. The fairy thinks that's nonsense, and our hero notices the city's atmosphere is not normal at all. One of the followers then approaches and hands a flyer to our protagonist on the street. He takes the paper with a strange symbol and thinks about the animals perishing near the labyrinth. Our hero wonders if part of the place collapsed and why Gafretic would have entered there. Our protagonist then tells Miriam that they are going to the labyrinth right now. The pink-haired mage says 3 days is too long and that they will go ahead alone to search. Suddenly, the mage reveals that she never thought she'd see a vampire right in front of her. With that, our hero is completely shocked by the revelation, and his eyes widen. The pink-haired person scoffs, saying vampires were hunted to extinction. They continue the taunt and wonder how our hero walks around in broad daylight. Angrily, our protagonist grabs the mage forcefully without any hesitation. Meanwhile, a preacher continues to yell that the Messiah is coming to save everyone. Our hero tightens his grip on the person's neck, showing all his pent-up anger. With a cold voice, he tells the mage to reveal their identity and how they recognized him so quickly. He threatens to break the person's neck, who asks to be let go so they can speak. The pink-haired mage tries to explain, but the force of the grip prevents them from speaking properly. With difficulty, they manage to say the words, "Blued Shadow," leaving our hero confused. The fairy Miriam finds the name familiar but can't remember where she's heard it before. Suddenly, the little fairy remembers something and is completely shocked by the revelation. She yells for her master to stop, saying he can't finish her off now. Our protagonist turns in surprise, and the fairy reveals that the person he's holding is a female mage, explaining that she's from the Blood Shadow School, a group of mages who serve vampires. With the revelation, our hero lets go of the mage, who faints on the ground, and the fairy confirms she passed out. Suddenly, the mage wakes up, annoyed, and complains that she couldn't answer with her neck being squeezed. Our protagonist apologizes awkwardly, and the fairy accuses him of starting the whole thing like a villain. The mage then composes herself, and, with a fake cough, prepares to introduce herself formally. She introduces herself as Sereno Romari and explains that her school can sense the presence of vampires. Sereno reveals she was looking for him at Jebin's request, and our hero understands everything. The mage asks about his friendship with the red-haired knight, and our hero thinks about shutting his rival up. She then reveals that she was also part of the subjugation group when Galfretic disappeared in the labyrinth. Surprised by the information, our protagonist asks her to tell him the details of what happened. The mage agrees and begins to recount that she needed monster items and joined the mission. She says the labyrinth is dangerous, but since it was almost cleared, they advanced with confidence. But when they went deeper, an earthquake started, and the whole labyrinth shook with a roar. She continues her account and says the labyrinth floor suddenly collapsed in the middle of the mission. When she was about to fall into the abyss, a mysterious hand grabbed her firmly to save her. It was the red-haired knight who saved her but ended up falling in her place into the dark abyss. Thanks to him, the mage was saved, but the other knights started yelling at her. Furious, everyone there believed the earthquake was Galfredic's fault for opening the gate to the upper levels. Since he saved her life, she felt obligated to tell everything to our hero, his friend. Our protagonist thinks her story is very different from what Jebin had said before. He wonders if the noble lied to him or if someone intentionally passed on the wrong information. But the mage reveals that at that moment, she managed to see something very strange at the bottom of the abyss. At the bottom of the hole where the red-haired knight fell, she saw a giant eye drawn on the rock. Our protagonist is shocked and asks if it was really an eye, and the mage confirms it immediately. She then remembers the cultists' flyers and shows that it was the same image of the eye. The scene shows us a cult worshipping the eye symbol and yelling that the Messiah will descend. They welcome him with sacrifices and call him salvation for the land. With a wicked smile, a hooded man reveals that he will awaken very soon. A soldier informs that the supplies are ready and everyone is already gathered for the mission. Lujitz asks how our hero feels and if he's excited to reunite with his friend in the labyrinth. Our protagonist just replies that he hopes he won't have to carry a body back from there. The black-haired knight knight says the red-haired man isn't the type to perish easily. He starts laughing and says Galfredic certainly has our protagonist's trust. Our hero thinks he wanted to enter sooner but needed to keep an eye on that scoundrel. He understood that his rival's disappearance was not a mere accident, as they had said before, and he thinks that if the man survived for 3 weeks, he can endure 3 more days just fine. Suddenly, a group of Templars appears and greets our hero, who is quite surprised. Their leader introduces himself and says it's an honor to serve alongside such a pious knight. The little fairy laughs at them, calling a vampire pious, and our hero just tells them to do their best. Lujits comments that it's rare for Templars to be interested in a knight, as they only follow divine orders. The knight even suggests that our protagonist change his class to paladin in the future. With a mocking smile, the man seems to be amused by the idea of a vampire paladin. The group then advances to the entrance, and our hero calls Partek to give some instructions. Inside the labyrinth, the group sets up camp, and Lujits orders everyone not to let their guard down. The fairy Marianne is impressed with the place and the water energy overflowing there. Our protagonist notices the place is different from a dungeon and looks like an artificial space. With that, he thinks that if the worst happens, he could survive by hiding in a place like this. Suddenly, Lujits appears with a smile and says it's the perfect place for scoundrels to hide. The knight praises our hero, and he asks how far they are from the disappearance site. The black-haired man tells him not to be impatient and reminds him that he trusts his friend. But he says the person our hero needs to trust the most is him, as they've already mapped everything. Our protagonist then questions that for a mapped place, there always seem to be many casualties. The knight laughs and, with a wicked look, says that those are just sacrifices for the labyrinth. With this revelation, our protagonist is completely shocked and furious at the man's coldness. Suddenly, everything starts to shake, and various debris falls from the labyrinth's ceiling onto the group. The man yells that it's an earthquake and tells everyone to hold on, as the structure is changing. Amidst the chaos, the knight informs our protagonist that they have arrived at the location. The scene shows us several giant gears moving and changing the entire structure of the place. The knight reveals that this moving zone is a shortcut to the upper levels. Sereno is startled by the tremor, and our protagonist remains with a serious look. Our hero then asks where the heck this shortcut is in the middle of all the chaos. With a wicked smile, the black-haired knight reveals the secret to him. He says the shortcut is right under our protagonist's feet, who goes on alert. At that, the floor opens up, revealing giant moving gears that change the place. With that, our protagonist and the mage fall into an unknown new floor of the labyrinth. He understands it wasn't an earthquake, and that his rival fell into a trap they already knew about. Sereno wonders why and suddenly points to something in the darkness of the place. Our hero then looks in the direction she pointed and is shocked by the scene he sees. His friend Galfredic is tied to a structure, all beaten up and unconscious. Without a second thought, our protagonist advances to rescue his rival from the trap. He lands nimbly in front of the red-haired knight, who seems badly injured from the torture. Carefully, he touches the man's neck to see if he's still alive. Our hero realizes he's still breathing and that he can save him if he acts quickly, but suddenly the fairy Miriam warns her master that something seems very wrong in that place. She explains that she felt a different presence coming from the depths of the dark labyrinth. With that, a strong and mysterious gust of wind begins to blow throughout the entire area. Serena wonders where the heck all that wind is coming from out of nowhere in the labyrinth. At this, a red light begins to glow in the darkness, drawing everyone's attention. From the total darkness, a pair of giant red eyes appears, staring at our protagonist. Suddenly, a monstrous arm covered in a pink energy appears in the middle of the hall. A giant demon-like creature emerges and prepares for combat. The mage is startled, and our hero tells her to protect the red-haired knight at all costs. With a roar, the creature advances with a powerful blow to finish everyone off at once, but our protagonist doesn't back down and defends the attack with his sword without any fear. With a determined look, our hero faces the giant creature without being shaken by its strength. A red energy surrounds him as he prepares for a counter-attack. The force of the impact is so great that the mage is thrown far away and lets out a scream of terror. The monster then glares at our protagonist with its eyes glowing in pure fury. The giant creature then prepares to attack with its weapon that glows pink. Sereno is startled, but our hero leaps to the attack without a second thought. Suddenly, an intense red light glows in the giant monster's chest in the hall. The creature attacks with a blow that shatters the labyrinth floor with great force. Meanwhile, the red-haired knight remains tied up and defenseless in the middle of the battle. Our protagonist is furious with what's happening right in front of him. With a swift movement, he launches a quick attack to stop the giant creature, but the monster attacks again and throws our hero and his friend far away with the impact. In the air, our protagonist reaches out to try to save his companion from the fall. hall. Suddenly, a magical barrier appears and protects our hero and the mage from the attack. Furious, our protagonist shows his fangs and wonders what kind of joke this is. Serena warns that it's a minotaur, a high-rank and very dangerous beast. Terrified, she yells that even a vampire would be defeated by that monster, but our hero is not shaken and faces the minotaur with a look full of fury. The mage then prepares for battle alongside our hero with her staff. Our protagonist then says the mage crossed the line with that magic barrier. Serena apologizes but says she can just watch a vampire throw himself to his demise. He replies that if she wants to save the red-haired knight, she needs to keep a cool head. The mage is shocked and says the labyrinth wasn't big enough to house a minotaur. Suddenly, Lujits and his group of Templars appear at the battle site in a suspicious way. The black-haired knight questions the mage for not having used her earth magic before. He scoffs, saying the mage only knows how to make chimeras and survived by pure luck. With a wicked smile, the black-haired knight faces everyone with his yellow eyes. He then questions if she didn't really want to save the red-haired knight with her magic. With that, our protagonist understands that it was Lujits who set up this whole situation. Furious, our hero realizes it was he who left his friend in that pitiful state. The knight scoffs and says he just brought the Lord's friend so he could find him. Then our protagonist grabs him by the neck and says he's very rude for a knight. With his eyes glowing, a dark energy appears in his hand as he tightens his grip. Our protagonist glares at him with pure fury and prepares to finish off the traitor right there. But the black-haired knight defends himself with one hand, and a pink energy emerges. Sereno is shocked, and our protagonist says that monstrous strength isn't his own. A purple energy envelopes the knight, and a magic symbol glows in his hand with power. The mage warns that this is a magic that grants power inherited from someone else. She explains it was once used to inherit power from humans, but is now forbidden. The knight scoffs and says it's just an excuse for cowards to monopolize power. He reveals they are the chosen ones to survive when despair comes to the world. Our protagonist understands he used someone else's power to defeat the red-haired knight. Furious with the revelation, a dark red energy surrounds our hero. With a look full of anger, he says he will first make him realize his place in this. The two then charge into combat, and the battle begins with a clash of energies. The red and purple energies collide in an explosion of power in the middle of the hall. The mage is impressed and wonders if a normal vampire would emit that kind of energy. With a wicked smile, the black-haired knight realizes he's not the only one with hidden power. The two then exchange blows at an incredible speed, and the fight becomes more intense, and they exchange powerful blows, with the battle's energy spreading throughout the hall. The knight warns he has no intention of holding back and releases more of his purple power. Suddenly, the floor breaks, and the mage is caught by surprise, falling into a trap. The black-haired man reveals that all the labyrinth's traps have already been exposed. With a wicked smile, he tells our protagonist to fall silently once and for all. Our hero desperately yells the mage's name, who is caught in the knight's trap. Sereno then creates a magic barrier to protect herself, and our hero charges to attack. He lunges at the black-haired knight with his eyes glowing in pure fury. With a determined look, our protagonist prepares to finish off the traitor right there. The knight then hides behind a stone wall that rises from the labyrinth floor. Our hero cuts through the wall with his sword and lands a direct hit on the knight. The black-haired man gets a cut on his face and glares at our protagonist seriously. He holds his weapon firmly and prepares for the next round of this intense battle. The knight thinks he heard rumors of our hero's strength, but what he saw was beyond expectations. With a wicked smile, he concludes that using the red-haired knight as bait was the right choice. With an insane smile, he reveals that finally the last sacrifice will be offered. Suddenly, several magic circles appear, and the mage wonders what's happening. Sereno apologizes and warns that the magic circle will no longer form. Our protagonist then goes to the red-haired knight, and the mage asks where he's going. Sereno is terrified by the situation and can't believe what's happening. She wonders what kind of hell this is and begins to regret getting involved. The mage laments getting involved and runs desperately through the labyrinth hall, but suddenly she stops and is shocked by the scene she sees right in front of her. Our protagonist is holding the unconscious red-haired knight in his arms in the middle of the hall. He then turns to the mage and asks if she can save this man's life. With a serious look, our hero says that wasn't the answer to his question. The mage is embarrassed and afraid of our protagonist's reaction, who stares at her coldly. With a sigh, she agrees and says she will do her best to save the knight. The fairy then appears and warns that she has checked everything and there are no exits there. Our hero agrees and says the place looks like the end of the labyrinth, an isolated boss room. The fairy reveals she can't control anything there and that the puddle has a different consistency. Our hero then steps into the red puddle, and the fairy realizes she can't control the liquid. The little fairy explains that the pool of blood has a very different consistency than normal. With a serious look, our protagonist analyzes the situation and the red puddle on the floor. He notices several eyes drawn on the floor and wonders if this is what the mage saw. The fairy explains she only controls the blood of the deceased and that this one's owner is still alive. With this revelation, a red energy emerges from the puddle and begins to move through the hall. A giant arm made of blood appears and prepares to attack our protagonist. The red energy then transforms into the Minotaur, which glares at our hero with fury. With his sword in hand, he tells the fairy to find an exit at all costs. The Minotaur then stands up, revealing its size and power to our protagonist. Our hero notices the red-haired knight still can't move and needs to act fast. With a determined look, he concludes he first needs to immobilize the monster. With that, our protagonist charges and attacks the Minotaur with his sword without hesitation. He then uses his dark ability to trap the monster and end the battle. With his ability, he manages to trap the Minotaur in shadow claws for an instant. Our protagonist takes the chance and advances to attack the monster with his sword. The battle continues intensely, and our hero prepares for a final blow on the Minotaur. With a powerful attack, he tries to pierce the creature's chest, but the sword doesn't go in. The Minotaur then opens its mouth and launches a blast of energy at our protagonist. The creature prepares to attack with its mouth full of teeth and yellow energy. Our protagonist dodges the attack, and the red energy spreads through the hall. The battle continues, and our hero dodges the Minotaur's attacks with great agility. He dodges another blow, and the monster's energy throws him up to the top of the hall. The Minotaur attacks with its horn, but our hero defends with his sword in the air. He then realizes a normal sword can't even scratch the monster's skin. With that, our protagonist decides that for now, he'll have to make do with what he has. A red energy appears in his hand, and he creates a new weapon for the battle. With a determined look, our hero prepares to use his new weapon against the monster. He then charges and attacks the Minotaur with his new weapon in a swift and precise blow. The battle continues, and our hero dodges the creature's attacks with agility. In the air, he prepares for a quick counter attack against the giant monster. With a cry of rage, our protagonist shows his fangs and charges with all his might, but the Minotaur hits him dead on and throws him far away with the force of the impact. The creature's attack hits the ground and creates an explosion of pink energy. With the force of the blow, our hero is thrown against a wall of the labyrinth. Suddenly, a beam of light passes through the Minotaur's chest without causing any damage. Meanwhile, Sereno tries to heal the red-haired knight with her light magic. She asks him to wake up as his friend is in danger in the middle of the battle. Our protagonist realizes the mage's words about the monster were true. He understands that this high-ranked creature is on a different level of power. The Minotaur seems to have not felt the attack and glares at our hero with fury. Annoyed, our protagonist wonders how he's going to defeat this monster. Then he decides to use all his power at once to win the fight. With that, a dark energy envelops him and he transforms into a beast. Sereno desperately screams our protagonist's name, who is on the ground. With his face covered in blood, our hero shows his fangs in a final effort. He glares at the Minotaur and feels helpless, a feeling he hadn't had in a decade. The creature attacks with its claws, and our hero tries to defend himself with his last strength, but he wonders why this time the pain of defeat feels so much stronger than before. With that, the monster's blow hits him squarely and throws him far away with great violence. Our protagonist feels his whole body ache, and darkness begins to take over his vision. Lying on the ground, he stares at the labyrinth's ceiling, completely defeated by the creature. He wonders why as the mage continues to care for the unconscious red-haired knight. The red-haired knight remains injured and unconscious in the middle of the battle, but suddenly his friend's eye opens and begins to glow with a blue light. With a determined look, the red-haired knight seems to have finally awakened from his slumber. Sereno is completely terrified by the scene unfolding right in front of her. The mage yells that this was why she tried to warn Sir Eugene about the danger. She keeps saying that no matter how strong a vampire is, there's no way to defeat that monster. The pink-haired girl then realizes there's nowhere left to run in that place. Sereno wonders if it's really going to end like this, as the Minotaur prepares another attack. With a sad smile, the mage apologizes to her master, saying her useless disciple will be saying her goodbyes right there. Suddenly, the red-headed knight wakes up and throws himself in front of her, taking the hit in her place. With his face full of pain, Galfretic laments having dragged our hero into this mess. The mage screams in desperation that they need to run, but the red-headed knight says he can't move. The red-haired man then reveals that the jerk Lujits used him as bait to lure our guy in. He explains that the target was the vampire from the very beginning, and that because he bragged about their friendship, he ended up holding him back. Angry at himself, the knight says all of this happened because he was too weak. Galfretic thinks that their connection might have just been a passing thing at first, but he was completely captivated by the strength and unwavering character of our protagonist. Because of that, the knight didn't want to let this bond slip away and wished to be strong enough to fight by his side. Galfretic turns to the Minotaur and says that it's all over anyway, as the monster prepares another one of its attacks. Sereno screams desperately for him to wait a moment. With a sad smile, the red-headed knight pushes her away and asks our hero for forgiveness. Lying on the ground, our protagonist watches everything as the red-haired man says that if there's a next life, he will become a knight to serve him. saying goodbye to his dear friend, and, with that, the monster's attack hits him head on. With the scene reflected in his eye, our guy is in total shock. Still on the ground, the vampire stares at what's left of his friend with a look of pure fury. Grinding his teeth in rage, our protagonist can't believe what just happened. In the face of the situation, a massive explosion of dark, red energy erupts from his body, sending the mage flying from the impact. Our hero then gets up, enveloped in a dark aura, and glares at the Minotaur with pure fury. The red energy begins to solidify on his body, creating a kind of shadowy armor. His eye then changes, and a strange symbol appears in his pupil, glowing red. His new form creates several tentacles of dark energy that move around him. With his hand transformed into a dark claw, he charges toward the Minotaur without hesitation. Completely transformed into a shadowy creature, he faces the monster with his single eye glowing in the darkness. With that, our hero charges full force at the Minotaur in his new shadowy form. The pool of blood on the floor begins to churn and climb the walls of the labyrinth. Our protagonist then lets out a roar of pure fury, showing his sharp fangs and claws. Sereno is completely shocked and wonders what that is. As Eugene's body is changing, the vampire then attacks the Minotaur with his dark claw in a devastating blow. With a wicked grin, our hero seems to be enjoying all this power. The mage notices that the pools of blood are reacting and moving toward our protagonist and understands that he is no ordinary vampire. With an insane laugh, the pink-haired girl tells her master that she might be witnessing a historic moment. Enveloped in his dark aura, our guy prepares to use all his new power in the battle. His hand transforms into a blade of energy, and he strikes the creature with a direct hit. Suddenly, a giant red eye opens up on the labyrinth wall. Watching the fight, Sereno gets scared and notices that the level of the blood pools has suddenly dropped for no reason. The Minotaur, which was injured, begins to regenerate at an absurd speed. The mage says that no matter how strong the monster is, its recovery speed is insane, and it seems to be under a healing spell. She understands that as soon as the eye opened, the blood pool shrank and the monster's fatal wounds healed instantly. The mage then realizes that the labyrinth is using its own blood to heal the giant monster. Our protagonist understands that he needs to stop the source of the healing, not the creature. With that, he charges forward and attacks the giant eye on the labyrinth wall. Sereno is in shock and yells, asking if that's blood coming out of the eye on the wall. Our hero then lands on top of the eye and prepares to attack again. Without hesitation, he strikes the eye once more with his dark claw. With the attack, the Minotaur feels the impact and takes the damage instead of the eye. As expected, our protagonist confirms that the master of the labyrinth wasn't the Minotaur. He understands that the environment was designed for humans to survive for long periods, but in reality, they were being devoured by the labyrinth. With that, the entire labyrinth was the god they worshipped, offering sacrifices, and our hero wonders if that thing was really a god. The creature then begins to fall apart, revealing it was just a puppet. Meanwhile, the cultists pray, saying that the god is furious and seeks to destroy the land, asking for the Messiah to appear. Our guy then faces the situation with a determined look, ready for whatever comes next. Far away, Lujits and his followers stand before a gate, begging for mercy for the land and for the rain of salvation to fall. With a wicked grin, the black-haired knight tells the god to run even faster and get completely lost, because he has opened its eyes, and now it's his turn to answer their prayer. Sereno is in total shock when she realizes that the entire pool of blood has been absorbed. With that, the golden artifact in the center of the hall begins to glow with an intense purple energy. The energy concentrates, and several eyes appear on the artifact, preparing for an attack. Faced with the situation, a new dark creature begins to form from that purple energy. The monster reveals its form with a single giant, red eye in the center of its body. The creature then fully manifests, showing its demonic and powerful form. Sereno gets scared and screams, asking where the creature is going, but it ignores her and continues on its way. Without a care in the world, the creature moves forward and breaks through the labyrinth's ceiling with a single blow. With the monster's escape, the golden artifact falls to the ground, completely broken and powerless. The mage is terrified and says she has never heard of a high-rank monster escaping a dungeon before. She wonders what they should do, as there is a village of civilians very close to the labyrinth. Suddenly, the fairy Miriam appears, shouting that she has found the exit of the labyrinth for them. The little fairy is shocked to see that the exit is wide open right in front of them. But, to everyone's bad luck, the exit begins to collapse, and the fairy screams in desperation at the situation. Miriam then yells for her lord to get out of there, but our protagonist doesn't seem to understand anything and just stares at her. Confused, Gavfredic's body hangs from dark spikes, completely broken and lifeless. Sereno calls our hero's name, who just stares at his friend's body in silence. The mage is shocked and wonders if a vampire would be mourning the passing of a mere human. Our protagonist then returns to normal with an expression of pure sadness on his face. With a trembling hand, he touches his own face, feeling the weight of the loss. The mage continues to think that this is a vampire who hides his identity, acts like a knight, and even forms bonds with humans. She then thinks that this is the first time she's seen anything like it. target, and suddenly, our hero bites the neck of his fallen friend, with blood dripping from his mouth. The scene shows just how serious that act was. Immediately after, dark wings sprout from his back, and he flies out of the labyrinth towards the red moon in the sky. Meanwhile, the one-eyed monster lands with a thud in the forest, ready to cause chaos. Our protagonist then flies over the forest at high speed towards the nearby village. The creature lets out a terrifying roar and prepares to attack the village with all its fury. Under the light of a sinister red moon, the entire village is about to be attacked by the monster. The mage then asks if our hero has ever heard of the original vampires and explains that they are the highest-ranking nobles among vampires, and now she understands that he possesses the blood of one of them. With a serious look, she says she has one more thing to add about that. The mage reveals that an original vampire can bring back someone who recently passed and turn them into a servant, leaving our hero in shock. She then looks at him and asks if he knows how these servants are created. Our protagonist confirms he understands the process, biting the target's neck and injecting his own blood through his fangs. With this, he remembers a past experience where the result was a disaster, making him very hesitant. He reveals he only tried it once, but the person's mind couldn't handle it, and the mage agrees that this happens with ordinary humans. However, she suggests that the situation might be different for a knight like Galfredic and recalls her master's teachings. The mage explains that if someone with particularly strong mental fortitude accepts the blood of an original vampire, their ego won't collapse. This way, the person would retain their skills from when they were human, which is why Serenoa believes it's definitely worth a try. The problem, according to her, is that as a proud knight, Galfredic might consider a forced vampire life an insult and possibly attack. Faced with the situation, the pink-haired girl asks what our hero thinks about all this. Our protagonist reflects that he never revealed his true identity to the red-headed knight, so there's no way to know his opinion on vampires. However, he remembers all the moments they spent together, from fights to conversations, forming an unexpected bond. With these memories in mind, the vampire seems to make a final decision about what to do next. He then turns to the mage and asks if there is any other way to save his friend. With no other option, our hero decides he will have to ask Galfredic himself, baring his fangs. With his decision made, our protagonist begins the ritual to bring his friend back to life. The process seems to be very painful, and our hero lets out a cry of pain as his eyes glow red. He realizes the blood is being injected too quickly, and that his fangs can't come out of the knight's neck. Faced with the situation, a mysterious voice announces that the rite of transmission has finally begun. It is explained that a servant is the property of the monarch, and that under the blood ritual, the servant's soul and power are bound to their master. With that, the scene shifts outside, where the one-eyed monster attacks Lujits with overwhelming fury. The black-haired knight is hit head-on by a blast of red energy, and lets out a scream of pain. The attack is so powerful that it creates a massive explosion of light at the battle site. The beam of energy then shoots up into the sky, illuminating the entire forest with its red light. Meanwhile, in the nearby village, the residents panic and start running for their lives. One of the men shouts that it's a roamer, and another warns that the labyrinth is collapsing. To everyone's bad luck, several strange creatures appear and begin to attack the villagers. A dragon-like monster attacks a man while a mother and her child watch the scene in terror. With the one-eyed monster in the middle of the village, the residents scream for their lives with nowhere to run. Far away, Lujits observes all the destruction and, with a wicked grin, says that the time has finally come. He then reveals that this is the moment he will receive his reward for offering sacrifices to the labyrinth. The black-haired knight claims that the humans there will never know it was all a setup orchestrated by him, and the labyrinth itself. His plan is simple: wait for the residents' desperation to peak. Then he will appear, defeat the monster, and become the messiah everyone is waiting for. With a wicked grin, he encourages more people to perish, because the more they suffer, the more he will be revered as the great savior. Meanwhile, in the village, the horde of monsters continues its relentless attack on the innocent residents. A woman screams in desperation as she sees one of her companions taken down by one of the creatures. A wolf-like monster corners a boy who screams for his mother as she runs to save him. The creature then opens its terrifying mouth, preparing to devour the defenseless child. The mother manages to reach her son and hugs him tightly, trying to protect him from the imminent attack. But suddenly, a white blur flashes by at high speed and stops the monster's attack instantly. It was Galfredic, now with a different, darker appearance, holding the creature's mouth with just one hand. With absurd strength, his hand, covered in a red gauntlet, crushes the monster's jaw. The red-headed knight then continues to crush the creature without any mercy, showing off his new power. He holds the monster's mouth firmly, showing he's not letting go anytime soon. The mother and and Sun watch the scene, completely shocked but relieved to have been saved at the last second. In the midst of the chaos, our protagonist appears, enveloped in a red aura and ready for battle. Lujits is completely shocked and wonders why that jerk Eugene is there. He questions if the Minotaur didn't awaken after absorbing our hero's blood. Terrified, he thinks that he offered Eugene as the final sacrifice, and that his demise was certain, but somehow, he came back perfectly fine. Faced with the situation, he wonders what exactly that jerk of a protagonist is. Our guy then glares at him from atop a monster and asks if Duke Jevin knows about all the trouble he's caused. With a smirk, he says it doesn't matter anymore, because the black-haired knight is going to pay for his sins right there. With that, Galfredic charges forward and attacks the knight with a devastating blow. The impact is so strong that it shatters the village ground and sends debris flying everywhere. Lujits lets out an insane laugh, completely shocked by the power he just witnessed. Galfredic then glares at him and asks if he missed him all this time. With a wicked grin, the red-headed knight says it's now time to return the humiliation from the tournament and asks if he's ready to pay for messing with him. With his eyes glowing pink, he glares at the cult leader Lujits with pure fury. Meanwhile, the one-eyed monster continues to attack the village, and the residents scream in desperation. But our protagonist appears and attacks the creature with his dark blade without any mercy. With his eyes glowing in intense red, our hero concentrates his power into a single point and fires a beam of red energy at incredible speed. The villagers are in shock and wonder if someone is really fighting the monster, noticing a knight with red eyes and black armor. One of the men then recognizes the figure and shouts if that isn't Sir Yan Eugene. The crowd cheers, believing he has come to protect the village, and that the knight is risking his life for them. But one of the cultists interrupts, saying that's not it at all. With a sinister smile, the man then reveals to everyone that this person is the true Messiah. He continues, saying the prophecy was true, and that the young man was sent from the heavens to save them, confirming all the rumors. Meanwhile, the battle rages on, and our protagonist lands a powerful blow on the one-eyed monster. With his hand covered in red energy, he attacks the creature relentlessly. His focused gaze shows all his fury as he prepares another one of his devastating attacks. The vampire gives the monster no rest and continues his relentless assault. From above, he charges full force at the creature, his dark aura spreading throughout the village, but his real target was someone else, and the red energy hits the hidden knight Lujit's head on. The black-haired knight lets out a scream of pain as the energy in his hand begins to fail. Lying on the ground and surrounded by his followers, one of the Templars screams in desperation that their god has been struck down. One of the Templars shouts that a disaster is about to happen and tells all his comrades to run for their lives. Lying on the ground, Lujits tries to get up and tells his followers that he has inherited the power of the gods. With a roar of fury, the black-haired knight declares he will become the god of a new era, but Galfredic appears in front of him, his eyes glowing, and blocks the path with his sword. Lujits is completely shocked by the sudden appearance of the red-haired man. With a mocking smile, the red-headed knight asks where all the monstrous strength the traitor had before went. The cult leader then wonders in shock if Galfredic was always this strong. After that, the red-haired man turns his back on the traitor, showing that he is no longer a threat. Galfredic then turns to our protagonist, calls him master, and asks for his next order. Eugene glares at all the cultists with a cold look and prepares to give the final command. Our hero then orders his new servant to finish them all, leaving Lujits completely terrified. With the order given, Galfredic charges full force at the black-haired knight, who screams in desperation. Lujits can't believe everything went wrong and thinks that victory was in his grasp, but with no time for regrets, the red-haired man lands a powerful kick on the traitor, sending him flying. With a wicked grin, Galfredic asks where he thinks he's going and warns that he'll have to pay the price for messing with him. Lying on the ground, Lujit starts laughing like a madman and says that, as expected, neither our hero nor the red-headed knight were human. With the entire village burning in the background, the traitor screams furiously, wondering how a monster like that dared to challenge him. After that nightmare, news of Lujits' atrocities spread throughout the Evergrow territory. With that, our protagonist became the great hero who saved the territory, and flower petals were thrown wherever he passed. However, our hero couldn't care less about all the celebration and fame he gained. The simple fact that Galfredic had returned alive was the only thing that truly mattered to him. The scene then shifts to a luxurious room where someone suddenly starts crying loudly. It was the fairy Miriam, who was on Galfredic's shoulder, crying and saying how worried she was about him. The red-headed knight is startled and asks what that is, touching it, and our hero says he can see her now. Eugene then explains that she is a creature that follows him around, leaving the little fairy completely indignant with the introduction. The small creature introduces herself as the great water spirit Miriam, and the red-haired man says he can vaguely see something. The little fairy then threatens the knight, but our protagonist grabs her mid-sentence, and she lets out a scream. He says she talks a lot and is annoying but is a little useful, and that normal humans don't see her, but because he's with him, the red-headed knight now can. Our hero then adds that it's especially because he has become his servant, leaving Galfredic completely shocked. With that, Eugene warns him that from from now on, he must only drink animal blood and that he only needs monster blood a few times a month but doesn't know how it will be for the new vampire. Galfredik looks thoughtful about his new vampire condition as he observes his own hand. Suddenly, he remembers a detail and asks if he now needs to avoid sunlight, and the fairy screams that it's obvious. Since he's a vampire, the red-headed knight decides to test it for himself and walks towards the light, leaving the fairy frantic about his actions. The small creature screams in terror while our hero is also shocked by his friend's recklessness. However, to everyone's surprise, the red-haired man is perfectly fine in the sunlight, suffering no damage at all. Sereno then reveals the reason, explaining that since Eugene is an original vampire, the rules are different for him. The mage continues, saying that burning up in the sun only happens to common vampires and that an original is the noblest of all, able to walk in the daylight without any problems. She concludes her explanation by saying that because Galfredik is the servant of an original, he is also immune to the effects of sunlight. Our protagonist then tests it on his own skin and realizes that he really no longer feels the negative effects of the sun. With a surprised look, he confirms that he is indeed perfectly fine in the daylight. The red-haired man then puts his arm around our hero and asks why he went to so much trouble to hide from the sun until now. With a mocking smile, the red-headed knight remembers the excuse Eugene gave about being an elf. He then says he now finally understands the real reason why our protagonist always wore a hat and refused his request to train. Our hero responds with a serious look that it was the best he could do at the time to survive. With an excited smile, Galfredik says there are no more reasons to refuse now, and that he's looking forward to working together with him. The red-headed knight then tries to call our hero by his name but gets confused and repeats the word. Not understanding, Sereno interrupts him and warns that from now on, he can no longer say Eugene's name and must call him master, because he is now his servant. The red-haired man gets angry with the rule and says that before being a servant, they are inseparable friends. The scene then returns to the labyrinth where our protagonist, in his transformed state, warns Galfredik that he is no longer human. The red-headed knight hears that it was the best our hero could do to save him, but the vampire warns that his new life will have many restrictions and threats, to the point where being gone might seem like a better option. Our protagonist then says that if he feels betrayed, he doesn't have to follow him, because saving him was just a whim. The image focuses on the bite marks on the knight's neck, a symbol of his new condition. Galfredik admits that those words hurt a little, but still calls him a friend. He continues, saying it doesn't matter if he's human or not, because what counts is that he liked our hero and was saved by him. Our protagonist listens in silence to his companion's declaration. With a determined smile, the red-haired man says he doesn't mind being a servant and is grateful to have been saved. Eugene continues to watch as Galfredik promises to follow him for his entire life. Back in the present, the red-headed knight complains that it's absurd not to be able to call his friend by his name, and our hero thinks about sewing his mouth shut later. Suddenly, Galfredik seems to remember something important and changes the subject. The red-headed knight then remembers something and asks his master what happened to the blonde mercenary and Partek. Our hero reveals that he gave them a secret task and wonders if they managed to complete it successfully. Elsewhere, Jabin reveals that the St. Lagran Monastery sent a thank you letter to our hero because, thanks to him, a faction of cultists was exposed there. It's explained that the Templars were using illegal anti-magic crystals to conquer the labyrinth and expand their sect. With this discovery, our protagonist sent his mercenaries to apprehend everyone involved in the scheme. Eugene then explains that from the beginning he found it suspicious that the Templars had volunteered for the labyrinth mission. He adds that with the rumors about the end of the world, he wondered what will of God led them to participate in the subjugation. The blonde noble continues, explaining that the monastery is sponsored by his family, and if the faction hadn't been discovered, their honor would have been tarnished. Because of this, the noble expresses his deep gratitude on behalf of the Evergrow family to Sir Eugene. He continues, saying that the residents' respect for our protagonist is through the roof and asks him to accept their praise and welcome. Our hero just says he's happy to help and prepares to leave but stops for a moment. Jabin then congratulates our hero on Galfredik's safe return and says he's relieved his friend is safe. After our protagonist's departure, the blonde noble is left alone in his office with a very thoughtful expression. His expression completely changes to a dark and calculating look, showing his true nature. The scene then shifts to a tavern where everyone is celebrating Lord Galfredik's return with a lively toast. One of the men in the tavern comments that the rumors about Galfredik's survival were very grim and that they thought he would never come back. With a smile and his mug in hand, the red-headed knight says he managed to return completely unscathed thanks to his master's help. Hearing this, one of the men gets excited and asks our hero to let him serve too, but the vampire refuses the offer on the spot. The red-haired man then laughs and complains that the beer tastes awful, commenting that he now has a vampire's tongue. Suddenly, Suddenly, the young blonde rabbin notices that the color of Gafredic's eyes is different and asks if something happened in the labyrinth. The red-headed knight just gives a mysterious smile without giving a direct answer to the mercenary. He then grabs Ray-Ban and teases him, saying the brat cleverly followed Partek and infiltrated the monastery. While the young man panics at the joke, Partek then approaches our hero and comments that it was impressive how he discovered the truth about the monastery, and that Duke Jevin was very surprised by the report. With a curious look, our protagonist wonders what exactly surprised the blonde noble in that story. He then asks Partek if he really thinks the thank you letter was out of genuine gratitude, and the mercenary wonders if Lujitz was used as a scapegoat. Our hero corrects his subordinate and reveals that he actually allowed it to happen because his order was to attack the Templars, not the monastery's abbot. He continues, explaining that if they had attacked the entire monastery, the Evergrow family's honor would be tarnished, and they would blame him for interfering recklessly. But by giving them a little room to act, the family only had to get rid of one person, the traitor, Lujitz. With this revelation, Partek is shocked, and our guy explains that because of this, only one person will make a move now. With a serious look, Eugene calls Partek and warns him that they will need to leave the Evergrow territory that very night, and the vampire adds that their departure needs to be done very discreetly, under the moonlight. With that, our protagonist rides at high speed through the dark, dense forest without looking back. Suddenly the scene shows us a caravan being surrounded by several knights in an ambush on the road. Inside the carriage, Raben panics and shouts to his brother about what they should do, while another man tells him to calm down. One of the knights then identifies the man mounted on a black horse and wearing a leather cloak as Yan Eugene. It is revealed that even though Lujitz was a sinner, he was a knight favored by Duke Jevin, and the noble lamented not being able to punish him directly because Gafredic had already finished him off. To the leader of the knights, this goes beyond deceiving the Duke. It's like tarnishing his honor. Therefore, to hold our hero accountable, he promises to put a scratch on that pretty face of his. The man then focuses on his target with a determined look, ready to attack at any moment. But to his shock, our protagonist appears beside him at an insane speed and glares at him with his glowing red eyes. In the blink of an eye, Eugene attacks and cuts down the man's horse without any mercy. From atop his horse, our hero then yells for his men to stop the attack at once. With the command, one of the enemy's horses crashes full force into the carriage, causing a great deal of damage. The archers on top of the carriage try to fight back, but the confusion is so great that they can't hit anything. With the ambush plan ruined, the leader of the knights orders all his men to regroup at the rear to escape. But the red-headed knight appears with a wicked grin and tells them to try and escape if they can. With that, the knights are shocked to realize the tables have turned, and now they are the ones surrounded. Our protagonist then dismounts and, in a cold voice, tells all the enemies to stay put. The red-haired man praises his master's tactics and says his sword skills have also improved a lot. With a smile, he comments that a saber is the perfect weapon for fighting on horseback and asks when our hero learned to use one. Our protagonist then reveals that he learned to fight that way from Gafredic himself, who looks very confused. The red-headed knight doesn't remember teaching him that, and our hero says the statement isn't entirely wrong. The scene then takes us back to the moment our protagonist bit his friend's neck. It's revealed that by injecting his blood into the knight's body, all of Gafredic's skills and experiences were transferred into our hero's mind, and at the same time, he remembers the mysterious voice he heard in his ear during the ritual. The voice said that a servant is the property of the monarch, and our protagonist wonders whose voice that was. After all, back in the present, a group of knights appears, and their leader insults the red-haired man for disrespecting Duke Jevin. They accuse him of not appreciating the Duke's favor and of blaming Lujitz for his own lack of skill, which almost got him finished in the dungeon. Our protagonist gets annoyed by the noise, and the red-headed knight recognizes the group's leader as Lord Excoli. Eugene then prepares to finish them all right there, but Gafredic stops him and suggests they treat them as prisoners instead of finishing them off. The red-headed knight then explains to his master that even though they are weak enemies, respecting the honor of an opponent who fought bravely is an old custom. And most importantly, if they ask for a ransom for the prisoners, they will get good money from it, and the red-haired man shows a gold coin to our hero, who remains silent. Our protagonist then asks with a wicked look if it's okay as long as their limbs are intact. With a dark smile, the vampire says that's fine and that at least he won't touch their joints. Next, screams of pure terror echo through the dark forest as our hero has a little fun with the prisoners. Moments later, the captured knights, now all bruised and missing a few teeth, are amazed by the luxurious room. The orange-haired woman, Priscilla, asks our hero if they can really stay there and says she's never seen such generous treatment for prisoners but that the company can cover the costs. She continues, saying they can get the ransom from Duke Jevin because, despite their appearance, they are still knights of the territory and are worth a good price. Our protagonist then interrupts her and asks her to fix his armor armor, which was easily pierced in the labyrinth. Priscilla promises to reinforce the armor, and Frederick gets excited when our hero asks them to make a new one for him too. Eugene says that since the red-headed knight is now one of his, he needs to maintain a certain level of dignity, and the red-haired man celebrates, saying he made the right choice in following him. With a smile, the orange-haired woman thinks she is indeed a good judge of character for having recruited the famous Lord Frederick. She continues her thoughts, saying he always brings in a lot of goods, so a few sets of armor are nothing, and you can't skimp on client benefits. The woman then turns and walks towards a pile of crates, thinking that with this level of skill, she will surely get much more. The orange-haired woman then asks our hero what his next destination will be, and he reveals that he plans to continue conquering the upper parts of the dungeon. With a sly smile, Priscilla says that for a bigger dream, more money is always necessary. Faced with the situation, she suggests a gambling den to him, and our protagonist is very confused by the proposal. Elsewhere, a fizz slams against a table with overwhelming fury. It was Duke Jevon, who was in his completely trashed office, shouting that his knights were a bunch of useless fools for not being able to handle a single knight and ending up as prisoners. With his face full of hatred, he thinks about our hero and admits he knew he was stronger than Lujits, but didn't expect so much power. He then wonders if he should just let things be after that jerk dared to finish off a knight from his domain. Suddenly, the blonde noble seems to have an idea and stands up with a determined look. With that, he remembers that our protagonist sought him out through an introduction from the Palin Merchants Guild and deduces that his next destination must be the demon realm that has a contract with them. He continues to think and tries to remember which demon realm the guild still has an active contract with. With a wicked grin, the blonde noble seems to have finally figured out where our hero is going. He then reveals with an insane smile that it's obvious where the vampire is headed. With that, he points to a map and reveals that our protagonist's destination is the Philia ruins on the Karlsbegen Peninsula. The scene then shifts to our hero and Frederick on a ship, where the red-haired man tells his master that the Karlsbegen Peninsula has almost no influence from the Central Church of Kalar. He continues, explaining that Marquis Archibald, who unified the peninsula, was a fanatic and was deposed for his tyrannical rule, which is why the situation there is very complicated. The red-haired man adds that the Bishop of Karlsbegen fled as soon as the Marquisate collapsed and lost the people's trust, and our hero says that's good news. Suddenly, a blue elemental creature appears and calls our protagonist Sir, leaving the red-headed knight very confused by the appearance. The creature then points to the mage Serenoa and screams desperately that she is very sick on the ship. With that, the red-haired man approaches the nauseous mage and asks why she came along if she gets so seasick. The pink-haired mage then says she believed her school's magic would be of great help, but the red-headed knight tells her to state her real purpose, and she reveals she needs byproducts from mid to high-level monsters for creating chimeras. Sereno continues, saying that researching and creating her own chimeras is the mission and ultimate goal of her school. However, the mage claims her intention to help our hero is genuine and swears it on the name of her school's magic and on herself, but the fairy Miriam says that sounds very suspicious. The little fairy then asks her master not to abandon the mage, and Serenoa says that if they're talking about purpose, the fairy is the most suspicious one for making a contract with a vampire. But Miriam reveals she can travel and collect gold coins, so why wouldn't she? The mage is shocked that the spirit likes money, and the fairy tells her to insult her with gold coins, and Frederick says everyone has their reasons for being there, and that they're just acknowledging how amazing his master is. The red-haired man continues, saying the mercenary friends are probably accompanying his master for the same reason as the men have fun in an arm wrestling match. With that, one of the men provokes the young blonde Ray-Ban and asks if he should just finish him off with a flick of his finger. The red-headed knight then turns to his master and asks what his goal is, as he has never heard him speak seriously about it before. Our protagonist then becomes thoughtful and, with a serious look, says he has only two goals in his life. With that, he reveals that his two goals are his memories and his revenge. The vampire continues, saying he needs to find all his memories to discover what kind of being he was, and that to use the red magic stone and avoid a miserable end like in his previous life, he needs to become stronger. He finishes the explanation by saying that the paladin who finished him off and the Central Church of Kalar relentlessly hunt vampires, which is why he can't let his guard down for a single moment. Faced with this revelation, Frederick remains silent for a moment, absorbing the seriousness of his master's goals. Shortly after, the red-haired man says our hero doesn't have to tell him if he doesn't want to, and that honestly, his goal doesn't matter because he's living a new life thanks to his master. With an excited smile, the red-headed knight says says that many interesting things are going to happen from now on and that he's looking forward to it, while our protagonist asks if he didn't want to rise in status. Gallfredic explains that this is rising in status because as a knight, he must seek honor in battle, and being able to travel and enjoy the sunlight is incredible, since if he had perished, he would be floating in the dark river of the underworld. The red-headed knight then turns to his master and thanks him again for saving his life. With a determined smile, he declares that his master's goal is his goal and that Eugene just needs to give the orders, as he will follow him no matter where they go or what they do. Our protagonist is silent for a moment, seeming a bit surprised by his new servant's declaration of loyalty. The fairy Marianne also appears and declares her loyalty, saying she likes gold coins, but that being by his side is much better. The small creature then asks if he is still going to build a castle of gold, and Serenoa and the mercenaries say they will also help and that their loyalty isn't bought with money. The pink-haired mage then asks that instead of money, he give them lots of monster byproducts, and our hero replies that it depends on her contribution. Eugene thinks it's a hassle, but it seems the number of people he needs to protect is going to increase. However, with a different look, he thinks that this is truly strange. With a slight smile, our protagonist concludes that this troublesome feeling doesn't seem so bad after all. Finally, the long journey comes to an end, and the ship docks at the Kalsbegen Peninsula, in the port city of Mopern. As soon as they disembark in Mopern, a group of mercenaries is already waiting for them at the dock, and their leader introduces himself as Biren, saying he was sent by the Merchants Guild to escort our hero to the barony of Biogalan. The mercenary captain explains that their schedule is tight and suggests they leave immediately, with our protagonist accepting the proposal without hesitation. With that, the party sets off on horseback through a dense forest, as it's revealed that the barony of Biogalan is one of the few places that has managed the Demon realm well. During the journey, Biren reveals that in recent months, the situation has become very difficult, and they can't even hunt mid-level monsters, and our hero deduces that the problem is a wyvern. The creature is a giant and very cunning red wyvern that thwarts any extermination attempt and only attacks directly after using harpies to tire out the hunting squads. Faced with the situation, our guy thinks that, as expected of a high-level monster, this could be a good opportunity to get a red magic stone. Suddenly, the mercenary captain advises our hero to simply pay the toll if they encounter bandits, and the vampire wonders what wyverns have to do with thieves. The man then remembers being warned not to treat our protagonist disrespectfully, as he was sent directly by the vice manager, Priscilla. Still, he thinks it would be a problem if the young man ended up being taken out by bandits before reaching his destination. In his thoughts, the captain believes that Gallfredic looks strong, but Sir Eugene is just a typical noble who uses the night to gain fame. He then tells our hero that their goal is to exterminate monsters, not bandits, and with that, the fairy Marianne warns her master that this guy doesn't seem trustworthy. Suddenly, our protagonist pulls his horse's reins hard, stopping abruptly and leaving everyone confused. Despite the sudden stop, the group continues on its way down the forest trail with a very tense atmosphere in the air. Our guy remains silent with a serious and focused look on the path ahead, as if waiting for something. Without warning, our hero calls for Gallfredic and asks for a spear, and the red-headed knight hands it to him at once, calling him master, and leaving Biren completely shocked by the scene. With his red eyes glowing, our protagonist hurls the spear with absurd force towards the forest. The weapon flies like a bolt and strikes the head of one of the hidden bandits who was waiting to attack. The man doesn't even have time to scream, and his companions are terrified by the scene as he falls to the ground. Realizing they've been discovered, the leader of the thieves shouts for all his men to attack at once. With that, a gang of bandits emerges from the woods, completely surrounding our hero's caravan. Biren's jaw drops, wondering how Eugene noticed the ambush since there was no sign of them nearby. Our protagonist then tells Biren and his men to stay back and watch the cart, but the captain desperately tries to stop him. The man shouts for him to pay the toll instead of fighting, because if he's reckless, he could get hurt, but our guy is unfazed by the warning and just looks at him with a calm expression and a stylish eye patch. With a little smirk, he simply tells Biren that the captain worries too much. Immediately after, he calls for Gallfredic, and the two ride into battle together, leaving Biren behind, completely baffled. The mercenary captain is terrified and thinks he had a bad feeling from the start, and that he was right about it. As our hero charges into the fight, Biren curses him in his thoughts, calling him an irresponsible and overly proud noble. Moments later, our protagonist holds a high-quality sword he took from one of the bandits and wonders why mere thieves would have such a weapon. The bandits then kneel and confess they stole the sword from a guy who bragged about stealing it from the Fairchild family and begged for their lives to be spared. They continue to beg and offer to become his slaves, but our protagonist just says there are too many of them and the food costs would be quite high. The bandits then shout that they aren't hungry and can starve as long as they can drink water, and Biren can't believe the scene. In his thoughts, the mercenary captain reflects that, as expected, this was the person the guild's vice manager sent personally, as he wiped out 4 bandit gangs in just 2 days. One of the villagers then approaches and says that after causing so much chaos in the village, the bandits are now kneeling so easily, while one of them cries, begging for his life. Our hero then says there's nothing to be done, and that since their schedule has been delayed, they need to leave immediately, and Galfredic agrees. But one of the villagers stops him and asks what he's going to do with the remaining bandits, and our protagonist wonders what he means by that. With that, the man asks if our hero isn't there to protect them, because they certainly thought he was. Our protagonist is silent for a moment, trying to understand the villager's confusion. Suddenly, the red-headed knight laughs and puts his arm around our hero, saying it seems they want to make him the lord of the village. The villagers then kneel and beg him to stay, because the village really needs a righteous person like him. Faced with the situation, our protagonist becomes thoughtful while Biren realizes they've wiped out all the bandits on the way there. With this revelation, the mercenary captain understands that this is a chance to live as the subordinate of an exceptional knight. With that, Biren approaches and asks our hero if he can say something at that moment. The captain then explains that the bandits he subjugated were a well-known force in the region, and that now he has either finished most of them or captured them as slaves. Biren continues, saying that the village and the surrounding region are like a cave without trolls and a mountain without tigers, and that, in other words, our hero can become the lord of the territory immediately. The fairy Miriam is completely shocked but at the same time very excited about the villager's proposal. With that, the small creature starts insisting that her master accept the offer and become the lord of that place. Our protagonist then reflects that there's no harm in having power or status, and that as an intangible power, it could help keep the central church in check. But the most important thing to him is still the red magic stone. He wonders if the position of overlord is worth diverting resources from his quest for the stone. Suddenly, a scream of terror interrupts his thoughts, putting our hero on high alert. One of the mercenaries runs in, desperate, and shouts that they have a big problem on their hands. The man then reveals that the bandits they captured as slaves stole the horses and managed to escape. Apparently, some of them hid pieces of metal in their mouths and cut the ropes that bound them, and when they all attacked at once, the young blonde Ray-Ban, who was bringing them food, got injured and is now calling for revenge. Our hero then asks if they should pursue the fugitives and seems to be thinking of a solution. The vampire turns to Pardek and asks if he was also injured, but the mercenary leader says he's fine and it was just a scratch on his hand. Upon seeing his men injured, our protagonist's expression changes completely, and his eyes glow with anger that mere bandits dared to harm his mercenaries. With a furious look, our guy declares he won't let the bandits live, and Rabin is surprised by the sudden change in mood. Galfredic then appears with his spear in hand and informs his master that he is also ready for battle. But our protagonist tells the red-headed knight to stay and protect the village and to inform the chief that he accepts the offer of lordship so they can take care of the wounded. With an excited smile, the red-headed knight agrees with the order and asks if he should now call him lord instead of master. Our protagonist then sets off on the hunt and with a determined look warns that he will pull those scoundrels out like weeds by the root. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, chaos ensues, and the residents scream in desperation that the village is on fire. From atop a hill, the escaped bandits watch the destruction, and one of them reveals he heard that the group that captured them is heading to the Philia ruins to hunt a wyvern. He continues, saying that since they are from Marin, they will either finish the subjugation and leave or end up perishing to the creature. With a wicked grin, the bandit leader says they will take Paranin back as soon as the Black Knight is gone. Faced with the situation, the man approaches the villagers and asks who they are and if they were the ones who set fire to the church. In a mocking tone, the bandit asks if the Black Knight getting rid of the other bandits made their lives good again. Their leader then declares himself the new master of that place, leaving the villagers completely terrified by the situation. He continues his threats and says that from that moment on, they will take the head of anyone who displeases them, while one of the villagers screams in terror. With an insane smile, one of the bandits reveals that as soon as they take the silver mine on the mountain, it will all be over. Suddenly, our hero appears behind the man and grabs him by the neck, saying so there was a reason for the bandits to keep showing up around there. With a swift move, our protagonist attacks the bandits on his horse, and one of them screams in desperation that the Black Knight is back. Standing over the fallen bodies of his enemies, our hero asks with disdain if that was their level after all the blood they spilled. With his red eyes glowing in the darkness, our protagonist glares at them and, in a cold voice, calls them fools. Terrified, one of the bandits screams in desperation and asks how he got there so fast, while another calls for him to come with him. Scared, their leader begs our hero to forgive them one more time and swears that this time they will truly surrender, but our protagonist doesn't fall for it and attacks the bandit without any mercy with his sword. One of the men trying to flee screams in desperation as he is caught by a dark, red aura. With a swift move, our hero uses his ability ability and finishes off the bandit who is trying to escape. The man lets out a final cry of pain before being completely consumed by our protagonist's attack. With the bandit fallen on the ground, our hero's sword remains embedded in his body as a reminder of his defeat. Our guy then cleans the blade of his sword, showing that the battle is not yet over. With a serious look, he seems to be looking for any remaining enemies. From a distance, he observes the village church, which is still in flames after the bandit's attack. Our hero then approaches the terrified villagers and tells them not to be afraid. In a calm and firm tone, he introduces himself as the Knight Yan Eugene and announces that the trash who tried to conquer Minton are no more. He continues, saying they have no more reason to be afraid and can rest from now on. With his eyes glowing red, our protagonist declares that he will protect this village with all his strength. With that, he raises his sword in a protective gesture and promises that he will take care of this place. But in the middle of his heroic speech, an arrow comes out of nowhere, and our hero catches it mid-air. Wondering what that is, our protagonist then deduces that the attack came from the forest, and at that moment, the fairy Miriam warns that she has a strange feeling. She continues, saying she feels an intense aura, like that of a high-level monster from the demon realm, and warns him to be careful. With the fairy's warning, he stares into the darkness of the forest, which seems much more dangerous than before. Without a second thought, our hero charges into the woods and, from the top of a tree, warns that this is already his marked hunting ground. But suddenly, a white-haired man appears with a crossbow in hand and starts calling our hero stupid and unscrupulous. He completes the insult by calling him a low-born wanderer and prepares to shoot. With a bluish glow at the tip of the bolt, the man fires his crossbow with full force towards our protagonist. But our hero dodges the attack with ease, and the white-haired man is shocked to see his vampire fangs and red eyes. Without wasting any time, our protagonist launches a counter-attack with a swift and powerful sword strike. With the impact of the blow, the man is thrown backward, and in a mocking tone, he asks why the surprise, since he himself is a vampire. He continues with the taunts and asks if the surprise is because he's a low-born wanderer and that's why he walks around looking so wretched. With an air of superiority, the man introduces himself as Melmung, in whose veins runs the blue blood of the Nofiros clan, and commands him to obey. With our hero's reflection in his eye, he calls him a stray mutt and orders him to burn to ashes. But in the blink of an eye, the tables turn, and the white-haired man is kneeling on the ground, all beaten up, apologizing profusely for not having recognized our hero, and saying he has committed a grave sin. The white-haired man thinks he's never heard of a wanderer using a silver sword and that he must be an original, and therefore, he must prevent the fall of his clan. Our protagonist then says he understands he's not the Lord of Nofiros but asks if his sire sent him to attack his own kind on sight, and the man denies it instantly. In desperation, he shouts that he acted on his own initiative and was a fool for his actions. The white-haired man starts to cry and begs our hero for mercy to finish him off at once, while the fairy says it's unbelievable how easily he crumbled. Our protagonist then remembers that for vampires, sires refer to those who turned them and that their society values affiliation and hierarchy. With an intimidating look, our hero asks if there is any reason to trust him after all the trouble he caused. The white-haired man lets out a scream of terror, completely terrified by our protagonist's presence. With that, he swears on the lineage of Nofiros and on the name of his sire, Duke Biolence, that he will do anything as long as he is forgiven. Our hero then repeats the word anything, with a wicked look, showing he has a plan in mind. The fairy Miriam then asks if he wants to spread rumors about the lord through that vampire. The small creature continues, saying it's good to announce the new lord of the village, but wonders if the man will only do as our hero commands. Our protagonist replies that he swore on the name of his clan and his sire, so they can trust him, but the fairy remembers that the Shadowkin are known for being cunning and treacherous. With a smirk, our hero says that he is one of them too, and the fairy agrees with the statement. The small creature then says she doesn't feel at ease, and our protagonist wonders if he should smack her. With a cold look, our guy says the man will do just fine if he doesn't want to perish, and the fairy calls him cruel. After some time riding, Bjorn calls out to our hero with a much more respectful tone than before. He then points to a castle in the distance and informs him that they are almost at their final destination. Our protagonist observes the castle with a serious and focused look, showing no emotion. With that, the mercenary captain reveals that this is the castle of Baron Biogalan and thanks our hero for coming from so far away. The castle structure is imposing, with several towers and windows, showing the wealth and power of the Baron of these lands. Inside the castle, a man hands a letter to Baron Biogalan and asks if he is not going to send additional troops for the 3rd Extermination Squad. The Baron takes the letter with a serious expression, and the man asks him to answer the question. With a cold look, the noble confirms the news and says his position is very complicated at the moment. Suddenly, our protagonist and his group enter the room, and the Baron says that a lord's job is not easy, whether in finances or troop management. In a mocking tone, the noble asks if a capable knight would understand, and our hero replies that he wants him to exterminate the wyvern with his own troops. Our protagonist then says he understands the situation, but in that case, the Baron Baron must increase the reward for the mission. The noble is completely shocked by our hero's audacity and stares at him, not believing what he heard. Our guy then reveals that he heard he has already failed to exterminate the ruins twice, and that for a third attempt, more troops should be sent, and if he cannot provide that support, he should increase the reward. Baron Beogalon is speechless and thinks that this is not an unreasonable demand to make. With a wicked grin, the noble seems to agree with our hero's proposal, but with ulterior motives. Faced with the proposal, Baron Beogalon bursts out laughing and praises our hero, saying he is as bold and spirited as his reputation suggests. From there, he agrees to the suggestion and calls his butler to prepare a new contract immediately. The noble then hands over the document and reveals he will give our protagonist half of the byproducts and magic stones from the extermination. Our hero agrees to the offer and, with a slight smile, says the Baron is as generous and merciful as he had heard. With a satisfied smile, the noble asks if the extermination mission can be carried out the next day, and our protagonist confirms that it can. Baron Beogalon then dismisses them, saying he will arrange for a guide in the morning and will make the annex available for them to rest comfortably. Our guy thanks him for the hospitality and gives the Baron one last look before leaving the office. Shortly after, our hero's group walks through a luxurious corridor of the castle, being watched by the guards. Meanwhile, Baron Beogalon watches them from a distance with a dark and calculating expression on his face. Outside, Partek approaches and asks if the discussion went well, and our protagonist reveals there will be no additional troops, and they will proceed as planned. The mercenary leader is shocked by the news, but our hero reassures him, saying not to worry as they secured a larger reward for the mission's success. Even with the larger reward, Partek still complains that this is very unfair treatment. With that, Gafretic places a hand on the mercenary's shoulder and reminds him that he followed our hero because he trusts his abilities. The red-headed knight continues, saying that if the worst happens, they are there too, so there's nothing to worry about. With these words of encouragement, Partek smiles and says that honestly, he never doubted Sir Eugene's abilities. With everything settled, our protagonist tells them to head to the Philia ruins without further delay. From the top of the walls, some mercenaries watch the third extermination squad leaving for the mission. One of them comments that the knight in black armor is the one who came from Meren, but they seem to have the least chance of success. Another young man thinks the knight is cool, but as an outsider, he will have little information about the wyverns. Besides, their scale is similar to that of the second extermination squad, and they should increase their troops to have a chance. With that, one of the men says that even with the arrival of a strong knight, he is still very apprehensive. Suddenly, one of the young men watching the group seems to make a decision and turns to his companions. With a swift move, he prepares to follow our protagonist's squad. The man then runs desperately, shouting for Sir Eugene to wait a moment before leaving. The fairy Miriam warns that someone is calling him, and our hero turns around, not understanding the situation. With the group already stopped, the young man approaches and says he has something important to report to our protagonist. He continues, saying it will only take a moment, and asks our hero to give him a little of his time. The scene then takes us to Baron Beogalon's castle at sunset, with a very peaceful landscape. The orange sky and the mountains in the background create a calm atmosphere at the end of that day. Inside the castle, a huge stain sack is thrown forcefully onto a wooden table. A burly knight enters the room and throws a sack on the floor, saying it's the byproduct of a wanderer he caught near the castle. Baron Beogalon seems pleased and wonders if there is any knight as loyal as that man. The noble continues, saying he is very proud to have such a strong knight who even hunts troll whelps, and the burly man gives an awkward chuckle. But the Baron changes the subject and reveals he called him for something more important than monster byproducts, and the knight asks what it could be. With a dark look, the noble says it's about dealing with someone who insulted him. He then reveals that the knight in black armor, Yan Eugene, disrespected him and that he is the leader of the third extermination squad, leaving the burly man quite shocked. Baron Beogalon says our hero will probably perish in the demon realm, but if he manages to escape, the knight should wait for him in front of the ruins and put an end to him. With that, the burly man grinds his teeth in anger and shouts how that jerk dared to insult the Lord. He declares that this is unforgivable and that he, Sir Oleg, will use his mace in the Lord's place to punish the traitor. The noble then smiles and says the knight is excellent and reliable, like his loyal servant. Baron Beogalon opens a chest full of gold coins, and the knight thinks that if our hero is finished, he will get another 100 coins and that he can't miss this opportunity. Elsewhere, we see the noble Jevon Evergrow reading a letter and thinking that despite all the pretense of nobility, malice overflows from those words. Back at the castle, Baron Beogalon thinks with a wicked grin that there is nothing bad for him in this whole situation. He concludes by wondering what difference it makes if an outsider knight perishes, while our protagonist and his group ride towards the ruins, unaware of the trap.